Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And today we are going to clear the air. As most of you know, there was a lot of going on in the recent weeks with videos and back and forths and blogs and comments and posts between myself and Richard, Dr. Carrier, and other people like John Gleason and Joel Pearson and stuff on people online who might be watching this right now. We get a little mad about certain things, but at the end of the day, it's just ideas. So there's no reason that we can't calm this thing down and get back to being civil again. And so, yeah, so I'm gonna speak a little bit on where I'm coming from, why I made the video, and then I'm gonna completely shut up, let you respond, and that's gonna be it. And then we can have a little discussion and then engage with the chat, maybe if people want to throw some super chats down. But we're not debating. We're not going to go back and forth on who's right about what Paul said in this verse right here. We're just going to clear the air and explain where we're at with everything.
Yeah, I don't know that we're gonna be able to avoid that, but we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll probably have a little discussion on certain things.
Yeah,
but
I think we keep it simple to like just a few things and not like go into the weeds of every freaking thing.
Exactly. So, I made the video because I saw another video about Litwa, people tearing into Litwa. He might have said some things that were incorrect regarding the ascension of Isaiah. I think Litwa's a great scholar. I think sometimes he says things because he's trying to get down on the level of what the text is saying. He might say things and people can jump and take him out of context. Say, "Oh, look, he thinks there was 500 eyewitnesses. He must be really a Christian. He must be a crypto Christian." But Lit was not like that. Lit was very critical of Christianity. He's very, very critical approach when it comes to Christianity.
Yeah,
he does have some. He does have some interesting ideas when it comes to divinity and things like that. But we all have our own individual ideas, and I don't think there's anything wrong with Litwa as far like he's not someone like Gary Habermas or Dr. I can't remember his name right now. He's not one of these apologist types.
William Lane Craig.
You read my mind. Yeah. He's not one of these types that we have to like constantly check and say, dude, that was bullshit. I'm calling you out on that, because I think people who do that kind of stuff, I can see why. Like there's some shit like you know what I'm saying.
It's that they do it so much. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. They do it so much on a daily basis on different radio stations, and and you got Gary Habermas talking about how there's more evidence for Jesus than there is for Alexander the Great. And
right. That happened recently.
we have archaeology from Babylon that says today's the day Alexander died. Like, you don't have that for Jesus. So that's just one example. And I think Litwa should never be categorized as someone who's engaging with in pseudo history. I think that's a wrong thing to say. And I think once we start playing this game of, Litwa's wrong or Ehrman's wrong, Ehrman, he's so wrong, and like we start playing this game and we're falling apart by battling each other when we're all on the same side of this thing. At the end of the day, I was talking to Derek about this. I can see your frustration with Dr. Ehrman, you in particular. So I kind of understand where you're coming from with some of this stuff, because it does seem like he's not engaging with you at the level that you hoped for. So I can understand that. I'll throw that out there. Also, I wanted to apologize to you publicly. We already did privately, but I wanted to publicly apologize for questioning your peer review material. And I don't know anything about that. I got information from multiple people who think that there was something going on with your peer review material. It's never really, it's led me down different directions that's been nothing. So until somebody on their own can prove that on their own, I'm not touching that anymore. I'm not going to address that anymore. I'm not going to talk about it. I even took it out of my video because I really don't know anything about that. I don't like speaking on things that I don't know about and just guessing and wondering if it's true or not because someone told me. That's just not how I operate.
Right. Yeah.
I took it out of the video. So that's that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was mythicism real quick, just on how I feel about mythicism, because me, honestly, I think all we need to do is look at Paul. And we look at Paul's 7 letters. And I think that there's enough in Paul that talks about there is a historical Jesus. For example, the phrases "born of a woman," according to the flesh, according to the seed of David. The rulers of this age, if they knew who he was, they wouldn't have crucified him. I think that's all plain Greek. I don't think there's anything strange, ambiguous about that. I've been starting to learn Greek myself, and those are some of the areas that I've been really reading into, like when I'm practicing my Greek. And I'm at the point now where I just think Paul's just being clear on what he's saying there. That's not to say that I have the answers. I could be wrong about this, and if I am wrong about that, then all of a sudden I think mythicism opens up a lot of doors at that point. If Paul really is speaking on a heavenly, outer space Jesus crucifixion, then we're okay. Let's play. Let's go with what your scholarship says. And I even said this the other day. If there is anybody out there who has the best approach to mythicism, it's obviously you. Obviously, it's not like who else? I mean, Dr. Price. He's great and all, but he's very speculative. He does a lot of comparative. He's like the old school mythicist. He's like the James Frazier type of mythicist. You have a new approach. You're looking at this without having to go down any conspiracy theory paths. I just disagree. I think the jugular for mythicism is Paul. That's just my opinion. And so with that being said, I think there's one more thing I wanted to say, but you know what? I'll just leave it at that for now. I'll let you respond.
Yeah. Oddly, I completely agree with you on that last point. And this is the thing that people, when they don't read my work, don't know that, in fact, I count two of those passages as evidence for the historical Jesus. The Galatians passage on born of a woman and the Romans passage on being made of the seed of David. Each one of those, and in fact, the brothers passage as well, which you didn't mention, but that's another one.
The brother James,
yeah. I count each of those. That's in Galatians.
That was actually the thing I was going to say next. I just remember that
Galatians 1. Yeah, each of those I count as evidence for historicity. People seem to not know that unless they've read my work. So that's why it's important to read the work. What I do, however, is I downgrade the weight of that evidence so that it is not as strong, because there are these things about those passages that are not normal, right?
Yeah, so you're talking about page 594, I'm pretty sure, in your book.
I would have to look at it to know. Yeah, but anyway, but it's the halo of problems with those passages that make them weaker as evidence. They still count as evidence. And in fact, I agree. I think the epistles is all there is, really. And that's where the debate has to be. And I think we can have reasonable debates about the strength of the arguments either way. How strong is that evidence? How weak is it? And so on. That's what I think the debate has to be. I don't think we're going to find any evidence in the Gospels for historicity or outside the Gospels for historicity. And I think that's actually starting to become a more common position among scholars, I've noticed lately. That's not unusual. But I do think that, it comes down to the epistles of Paul. So we don't agree on that. I mean, we don't disagree on that. So I come at this from a completely different perspective. I see too much of cult of personality here about how we all should just get along. We should support our favorite scholars and never have a discussion of what's true or what's false. But never attack someone for saying something false. If you have evidence that someone has said something false, you're obligated to point that out, actually. And if someone else says that, and you are like, whoa, that's quite a statement, then you have to check it. You should check, right?
Sure.
And so the problem that I have, let's just go through the sequence from my perspective. What happened in history recently?
Sure.
Is that on another channel, Litwa actually slandered me by making false claims about my spreading disinformation, not being up on the scholarship, and not knowing basic facts about the ascension of Isaiah. And every single example he gave of that was false and provably false. So he slandered me, right? Just full on. He said false things to try and disparage me as a scholar. So I respond by documenting this. I actually present evidence that. Can
you just give me what exactly? I totally missed this. What exactly did he say?
Well, actually, we can get into that later. Okay, I would love to. That's one of the two things I'd like us to talk about today.
All right.
So anyway, that happened. I responded, and then you responded to me by doing the exact same thing Litwa did, basically slandering me by claiming that I'm spreading disinformation, that I'm not up on the scholarship, that I'm lying to people, and so on. And just like Litwa, everything you said that was supposed to be in support of those points was false. Like you screwed up a lot of things. So you did to me the same thing Litwa did. So that kind of pisses me off, right? So that's why, like, I'm a chill guy, but I'm on edge over that because that bothers me. And I do have planned when I get back to like write a response piece that covers this. To be honest with you, though, although I didn't see Godless Engineer's video, I did see a draft of the script for it, and I'm pretty sure he's spot on in most of that. So I don't
Which video are you talking about?
Video. The one where he goes into the Philo stuff. He might have gone into other things too, but
no, I think that was a complete flop, in my opinion.
Okay,
we can get into that.
Yeah, right. So that's actually the other example I'd like to talk about. But
sure,
the point I want to make first, though, is that I don't care about the cult of personality things. I don't care about who we're friends with or who we like or whether we're a mythicist or not. I don't care who's a historicist. Derek's my bud, and he's a historicist. It's not a problem. So I don't like get into Twitter wars with people or anything about what position they take on this. All I care about is the truth. Like that really freaking matters to me, like more, I think, than most people, to the extent that I really get a bug up my butt when people like say radically false things and don't take responsibility for it or don't correct it. And then to use that to try and slander a fellow scholar. Now, people accuse me of doing that, but they don't actually check to see if I'm right first, right? Instead, it's, Carrier attacked Litwa, now let's attack Carrier, rather than Litwa attacked Carrier, Carrier responded, let's go fact check Carrier to see if he's right or if Litwa's right. You know what I mean? Like your video should have been like fact checking which of us, Carrier or Litwa, was telling the truth about those things. And I wrote a whole blog, so you had blog material to work with from me on this, and you had the video and the whole deal with the Litwa video. No, but instead, you went and did what Litwa did and went and attacked me. So that's
well. What do you think? I mean, how hard is it to say Litwa's wrong about this? Here's what I think he's wrong. Instead of saying he shouldn't have a PhD, he's lying right now.
I never said he shouldn't have a PhD. Also, I think
you did question his PhD.
No, I never have done this. No.
In fact, the Godless Engineer video?
I'm not in the Godless Engineer video.
The one about Litwa and that you guys were talking about with when he was the video he did with History Valley. You guys were saying people like this should not have PhDs. This is just completely wrong. Okay,
I remember saying the opposite, saying that I actually like a lot of Litwa's work and I think it's really solid. I'm pretty sure I said in that video that most of Litwa's stuff is good, and he just dropped the ball in this one thing, and that it was weird to me that he would be so dishonest.
Well, I think the final cut didn't make it because Godless Engineer did not put that in.
Okay,
it came off as you guys laughing at him as like he doesn't know what he's doing, like he's some
maybe about the Ascension of Isaiah thing, but not about his work altogether. Like all his other work, we didn't disparage his other work. We didn't really criticize anything else that he's argued. We only went on this one thing that he screwed up, and I went through point by point what he screwed up in this. So I've never said anything like he shouldn't have a PhD or that the rest of his work is terrible. Actually, I'm pretty sure I said the opposite of that. I'm pretty sure I said all the rest of his work is pretty good, and that it's weird that he got everything wrong in this one particular time.
And it wasn't just Litwa either. It was like calling out Charlesworth as being some crank.
Well, there's one joke about
people like Charlesworth though are like, this is somebody, even if you disagree
you're doing cult of personality again. You're talking about, his honor matters more than the truth. Let's stick with the truth. We made a joke about one thing that Charlesworth said in his career, which was a stupid thing. Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, I know what he said, and that was a stupid thing, but that's not all that was said about him.
Just accept the truth.
That's not all that was said about him, though.
About Charlesworth? Yes, it is. That was all I said. I said he did one silly
I wish
thing.
I had the tape right now to show you, because I can't read through it.
Yeah, no, I never disparaged Charlesworth's career at all. I just said that one argument is silly. And in fact, I think Godless brought it up, and I'm the one who pointed out that it was silly. But no, that is all
he's the one who edited. He's the guy who edited the Ascension of Isaiah text in the pseudepigrapha. And that was the text that Litwa was referring to.
He's one of the people who did,
Yeah, well, his name's on the front of the cover of the pseudepigrapha.
Yeah,
he's the editor of it.
Yes,
now, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that to be a cult. What I'm saying is,
but do you know
the reason why I'm bringing that up? The reason why I'm bringing that up is because Litwa was referring to that.
Yeah, and he's got it wrong. He's wrong.
But that's not the same.
Even Charlesworth describes the majority position.
What did Litwa say wrong about that?
Charlesworth does go against the majority position of Ascension of Isaiah scholars. But he does mention the majority position and explains why he goes against it. So if Litwa had actually read Charlesworth, he would know what the majority position was and know that he has to argue for it. In the video, when Litwa was talking about it, he knows none of the majority position. In fact, he makes statements that show that he knows nothing about the Ascension of Isaiah scholarship. And we talked about it in the Godless video. Here, let me bring up some examples.
Sure, that's.
I'll bring up one example. When he says, Mary the Virgin, line of David, and the baby Jesus, he says they're still in what he called the shortened version of the Ascension of Isaiah. That is false. 100% false. Not even remotely true. Can't even be argued. Why did he think that? There's no way he could think that if he'd actually even read Charlesworth, much less read Nib or Knight or Charles, who are the scholars that I follow, as well as Enrico Norelli. There was just another thing, is that Litwa says, we're not looking at Enrico Norelli. I cite Norelli and use Norelli as a source in my book. Litwa didn't read my book, claims to, but he didn't. So the thing is even Norelli agrees.
But if I'm not mistaken,
here.
you didn't actually cite Norelli, you just cited his book, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's
so he might have got it wrong. I mean, that number, I'll be right.
Well,
he thought you didn't.
Yeah, I can see how if that's the only mistake he made, that's not an easy mistake to make, but it's a
not
trivial
a big mistake. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's right in note 1. If you look and see CCEL volumes, whatever, he would say, oh, that's Norelli. Like anybody who was actually reading it and knew the field would know that. But if that's all he did, that would be a trivial mistake. And say, oh, you missed the footnote. You missed that CCEL is Norelli. But no, that's not all he did. So what he did is something far, far worse, where he says, I don't cite Norelli, and then he doesn't even know what Norelli argues. Norelli sides with me on like half these things that Litwa talked about. And so Litwa doesn't even know that Norelli's with me.
What are some of those examples? Do you have those with you right now?
Well, for instance, Litwa argued that so there's a little bit of a reference to the pocket gospel in the Ascension in the Martyrdom. And the Martyrdom is the first 5 chapters of what's collectively called the Ascension of Isaiah. But really, the Ascension of Isaiah is chapter 6 to 11. And the majority position of scholars, like by a wide margin, is that the martyrdom was written separately and then added to the text later and possibly edited at that time, or it was written to be added to the thing. There's a debate in the field as to which of those two things it is. I don't take a position in that debate. Either one is possible. But either way, everybody agrees that the Ascension of Isaiah was written separately from the martyrdom.
Sure.
So you can't cite the martyrdom as evidence for what was originally in the Ascension because it's not the same text. And in Litwa's discussion, he showed no knowledge of this. He had no idea that the martyrdom is a separate text that was added later, possibly written later. That's what I'm talking about. And that's in Norelli. Norelli goes into that in great detail. And Norelli says, no, the martyrdom can't be used as evidence for the Ascension text because it's written separately and was put in later, etc. Norelli has different arguments, and Litwa never used any of Norelli's arguments. So he showed no sign of having read Norelli himself. But this is another example of a fundamental error where there's no way you could have read anything, whether it's Charlesworth or anybody, on the Ascension of Isaiah and not know this basic fact about the martyrdom and the Ascension being separate texts. So that's 2 mistakes now. What was another one that he did? Oh, right. He says the only reason scholars, and he implied, I know he was really rambly, so I can't be 100% on his grammar, but he implied he meant only mythicists, but he said scholars, so we'll give him charity in either direction on that. But he says scholars have no reason to believe the pocket gospel is not original to the text. They just don't like it, so they just declare it. And so there's no arguments for it. And consequently, in the whole half hour, Litwa never responds to any of the arguments for the pocket gospel being an interpolation. There are tons of arguments, and it's not my arguments. I got the arguments from all the Ascension of Isaiah scholars that I use and cite. There's a lot of arguments and so for him to claim that there aren't any arguments and then never respond to any of the arguments, and then just declare us to spreading disinformation because we have arguments, it doesn't make any sense, especially since he's attributing this to mythicists, and I'm just using the scholars on the Ascension of Isaiah who aren't even mythicists, right? So this is galling to me. Like when Litwa did this, it's astonishing, and I can't understand how he could, with a straight face, say all of these things, which demonstrate he hasn't read any of the literature, none of it on the Ascension of Isaiah. How he could do that and pretend like he's an expert on this and not just say, you know what, I haven't read any of this stuff, I don't know, right? Like an honest scholar would say, I actually haven't read Norelli, I haven't read Knight, I might have skimmed Charlesworth, but I don't know enough to deal with these arguments here. That would be more honest, or to actually do the research and know what you're talking about and actually respond to our arguments, which would be a much more productive way to handle this, right? If he wanted to say, I disagree with Carrier and Charles, for example, on this issue, and here's their arguments, and here's why I disagree with those arguments. That's not what he did. He asserted that we had no arguments, that there's no arguments in the scholarship on the Ascension of Isaiah at all for these positions. And then displayed the fact that he didn't know that the martyrdom and the ascension are separate texts, that he didn't know that there was no mention of Mary and the baby in the shortened text. Those are the main things. Like, there are a bunch of other minor errors, but those are the big three, I would say, that demonstrate that he didn't know what he was talking about. But with a straight face, he just does this, and does it not just to say this stuff, but specifically to slander and disparage my scholarship. So he's attacking me with literal slander, these false statements, trying to make me look bad. Now, he did this one time. I don't know of any other instance. He did one other time to me in his book in a slightly different way, but I've not seen him do this to anyone else. I've not seen in his scholarship. I've not seen this I don't think he's like Habermas or Craig, right? I don't think he's doing this all the time. In fact, and I expressed this in the original recording with the Godless Engineer video, that I thought it was weird that why is it just this one time when he's dealing with me that he has to slander me with all these false statements. He did it about my book earlier. In his book, he actually said tons of false things about the content of my book, and said really weird things about me, like that I thought that I had a battle with Yahweh when I was younger, and that I thought Yahweh was a demon. And I mean, there's just really strange things that Litwa has said about me. But that's a whole separate thing.
I'm interested to see how he responds to everything, because I haven't got a chance to talk to him yet. He's been out of town. He's been busy.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to see, right? Is to say
I'm interested, because he doesn't usually he's usually pretty spot on and pretty
that's
good.
My opinion. Yeah, that's my opinion. I've like his book Jesus Deus is a masterpiece. I think it's really excellent. I think I might even cite it. I can't remember, but
Found Christianities is just completely. By the way, mythicists should be all over that book, because it really demonstrates.
Yeah, right. I mean,
a lot of the cults. Yeah,
I have a different opinion about that, because I think late evidence is less useful.
Sure.
But no, you're right though. I think that's a perfectly fine book. And although I haven't fully read his, what is his latest book? Is that Gospel and
the Carpocratians that he just put out, a book about Carpocrates.
I don't know anything about that one. What was the one right before? Was it Gospels and History or something like that?
I think so. Yeah, he's always putting out new books, so it's hard. It's hard to say which one was the recent one.
I can say that I totally agree with the thesis of that book. I haven't fully read it, so I can't say if it's good or bad. But from what I saw of it, it looked like a pretty. Yeah, there it is.
This is the one that just came out last month, 2 months ago, and it's pretty good stuff. Like he really puts together through little tiny manuscripts. Here he pulls one out of here, pulls a fragment over here. He puts together an entire biography of some lost Christian heretic.
Yeah, he's no joke. He's a real scholar, does real work. That's why I'm so shocked and surprised by what he did on this one video. I was shocked and surprised he would go that far on that video. I mean, he did something similar in his book, although not as egregious. It was bizarre, like what he does in his book. If you read it, you can check that out. I have page numbers and discussion on my blog as well for his book. But he's got something in for me where he just wants to lie about the content of my work, or lie about having read it, which it's one thing or the other, because it's not possible for him to have read something and not know what's in it, right? So if he displays ignorance of what's in a text or what's in an argument, he's either not read it or he's not telling the truth about what was in it. And that's what's happened with the Ascension of Isaiah scholarship, is that he's not telling the truth. He's either not telling the truth about his knowing anything, like he either knows he didn't check any of this stuff and doesn't know what he's talking about, or he does know all of the things I told you just now and deliberately lied about them, which would be even more shocking. I don't know which
I highly doubt he would lie like that. Maybe he was wrong about some stuff. I still want to get his answer.
Absolutely. I think you'd be great to have him on the show and see what he responds to this.
Yeah,
and you can have him read my blog.
He's a good friend too. He's a good guy. I don't think he would just randomly. And he's also addressed mythicism in his own writings, and he's very
in his book. That's when he slandered me in his book. Yeah.
Well, that's in that case, but he's also written articles and blogs on his own Patreon where he says, look, mythicism, I understand where it's coming from. I just don't see that the evidence is there, but he's still trying to engage with the position at some level.
This gets back to my point. It's like, all I care about is the truth, man. Like, if he could just tell the truth, then I'd be cool. I'd like an explanation of why he didn't. If he said, I shouldn't have done that, I should have checked my facts better before coming on or something, like that would that would help me out a little bit. But otherwise, it's shocking to me that this disrespect for the truth and to slander me. And then when I defend myself, I get slandered, which is what you did. That is, you basically, it's like the bully picking on the victim of another bully. It's like you're attacking the victim of an abuser. That's not cool, man. So, in any case,
I didn't see it that way at the time. I saw my friend Litwa,
you went cult of personality, right? You said, "Oh, he attacked my friend."
No, I won't even deny that because and I think that people who have been around and who are established in academia, when they get criticized as being biased or being wrong, we get into this dangerous mindset that you see with, like, for example, something like climate denial. I'm not saying that you guys are doing that, but I'm saying is when you have the mindset of like, oh, Duke Theological is all completely biased against mythicism. Nobody there can be trusted. What are we doing at that?
I never say anything like that.
No, I never said you said that, but I've heard mythicists say this before.
I agree with your sentiment. There's people who say all kinds of crazy things on the internet.
I mean, you had a couple months ago, and I'm not even comparing. Please don't take this that I'm comparing mythicists to climate denial, but I'm just going to use this as an example.
Sure, right.
There was a report. It was called the. I'm trying to think of I have the name of it right here. It was called the "There is no climate emergency declaration," and they had 1,000 signatures from people all over the world who have PhDs in like geology, who deny climate science. Now, people like Ralph Ellis, and this is real. I'm not just making it up. He actually totally reposted this and said, "Look, all the experts agree that climate change is not a big deal." And look, this guy has a PhD. See, and so that's why
I agree with pretty much all your positions on Ralph Ellis. Sure. And so that's ridiculous. And I agree with what you just said too. No, absolutely, we should be cautious against that. But here's the thing: is my concern is, I want to live in a community where when someone slanders someone else and someone claims that they're slandering them and gives evidence, the response is not to keep slandering them, but to go and say, oh, wait a minute, is he telling the truth? Like, fact check it. Find out first, right? Like, who is right between Carrier or Litwa? Like, I want a community where people like care about the truth and not defending cults of personality stuff. Like, oh, I got to defend my man. I don't want that. I want people to care about the facts. Like, what is actually true? Carrier said some things. Are those things true? Sure. They're checkable, right? So
that's a fair point.
Right. That's all I wanted. And that would have been better. Like if you'd done a hit piece where you're defending Litwa.
This just popped in my head now, actually, because I didn't even think about this, but I was already engaging with the Philo. The reason why the video starts off with so heavily on the Angel of Philo thing, I was already engaging with people like Joel. By the way, shout out to Joel Pearson. He's been cool as hell this whole time. Seriously, all throughout this, I've been getting like personal attacks. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're doing. Every time I go live, from certain people, I'm not going to name
better about
and they're in the chat right. Joel's been amazing.
All right, that's cool.
Joel's just been like, you know what, fuck you too. Like we're just laughing at each other. Like, who cares? It's just ideas. Like we don't have to we don't have to hate each other over it. That's how Joel. David Fitzgerald says nothing to me about this. Doesn't care, not getting personal about it. That's the type
I only get personal about it when it's anchored to the facts, the question of facts, right? So it does get personal when people slander me, right? So sure. But no, I don't go shit talking people on Twitter or in messages.
Jump in the comment sections are freaking out. Like,
I don't normally. If I do at all, it'll just be to a straightforward, here's why you're wrong.
Sure.
That's how I handle things usually.
Now I want to say this though. I'm not even going to fault you for when you said that I was having a mental breakdown. And the reason why I'm not even faulting you with that, because I know for a fact where you were getting this information from. People like Tim Mills and people like John Gleason going around. They can.
That isn't the case. No. Neil,
okay, so where did you? What happened with that? So what made you think I was having a mental breakdown?
That response was to the original version of your video, which said some other things, right? The original version of your video. Now, if you add that, like the other stuff you took out, plus
you're talking about the part at the end.
Yeah, everything at the end. There was a lot of things that you said that were very slanderous.
Sure.
And fallacious, like total ad hominem, like blatant naked ad hominem. And then you add that stuff to all the other stuff that was very rambly and inaccurate and making like weird mistakes that I want to find out today how you made them.
Like,
It,
okay,
it looked unhinged, and it was so far off base that my initial response is, I don't need to respond to this, because anybody who knows what they're talking about knows that, like, this is crazy. Like, what is he doing? Also, just the fact that that's how you chose to defend Litwa, is to attack me rather than check the facts. So you put all those things together. My most charitable interpretation of that is not that you're like some sort of liar out on a campaign, but that you must be having, like, you were drunk or having a mental health breakdown or whatever. You got really emotional and then got careless.
Well, it wasn't just about defending Litwa. It was actually, I actually wanted to make a video. Like I said right before I said
so
this.
you already had prepped
I was actually planning on making a
right?
video
Yeah.
about the Angel of Philo. I already had stuff going on with that. And then that video came out, and then I fast tracked it. It went to the top of my priorities at that point.
You fast tracked it, and you got like really emotional and a bit rambly and a bit careless.
If I came off as emotional, I can see it, but I honestly tell you, I did not. Was never once emotional.
Just, if you put all those things together,
never once held any weight in my life outside of the video.
Right. Well, anyway, it's just, if we put all that stuff together, as I was looking at that point, I could not, especially since, and this is the thing, you are usually very cautious. You were usually ready to say you don't know something, or you're not sure about something. You're usually pretty good critical thinker. Like, your shows are usually pretty good. That show is so out of character for you that I had struggled to understand what could explain the behavior. Right. So that's
you're not just talking about the part I clipped out. You're talking about the actual stuff that I get into with my criticism of mythicism. You're talking about that too?
Well, that too. Yeah. But the point is like, if you take that and then stack on top of it everything else, right? That was what I was reacting to when I told people, I was like, I'm not going to respond to him because I think he's having a mental health crisis.
Okay, so
that was my take on it.
Can you see why people are critical of you when you get into an engagement of disagreements with somebody? You seem to be quick to question that person's mental health. Can you see that as being problematic? Maybe
I only do it when I have evidence of it, right? And the way you went to direct slander, and the way that you were rambly, and the sort of like unhinged, often like seriously inexplicable mistakes that you made, and then on top of that's how you responded. You just did this cult of personality thing, that you were way more emotional than you are, less cautious, less critical thinky than you are than your other videos. Like, it was so uncharacteristic that there had to be some sort of explanation for why, when it comes to me, for some reason, you had to behave that way. And so when I react like that, I always give evidence for why that is, right? And so what this gets to my point about truth. Like, rather than just complain about me saying someone lied about something, check if it's true. Just check if it's true. And then say, like, I checked, it's true, and Carrier is wrong about this. Then you can criticize me for jumping on the gun too fast. But if you check and you find out it's true, like if you check this Litwa stuff, and I would recommend that maybe don't totally trust Litwa, just in case, that you get like some sort of reliable third party, like someone, like contact an actual Ascension of Isaiah scholar, and have him watch the original Litwa video and read my blog, and then see if how they advise you, right? See like what they would say about it or something. That would be the easiest way to do it. There are ways for you to like Google and actually find discussions of Norelli and the Ascension of Isaiah in other places unrelated to this whole dispute, where you can actually get independent perspective on what is true about the Ascension of Isaiah. And then you'll know which of us is telling the truth.
Well, if you remember my video, I didn't put too much weight into what was said. I put more weight into that if Lit was going to be called a scholar who shouldn't have a PhD, let's get into why mythicism has problems.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't say that. So I didn't say he shouldn't have a PhD. I don't know where you're getting that. Maybe Godless said it and I didn't notice, but
I'll look back at it. Maybe I'm wrong about the way you said it. I'll look back at it. But there was something like that. But regardless of that, I didn't want to focus too much on the Ascension of Isaiah because it's something I'm not really too.
Yeah, right.
It's such a complicated thing.
I think we can settle that right here by just saying, like, I think you should either say you don't know anything about it, so you don't know who's. I
actually did say that in my video.
Yeah, but I'm not
right.
I'm not criticizing. I'm not criticizing you on the video on that point. I'm saying that for going forward, either just say you don't know who's telling the truth, whether it's Litwa or Carrier, or you do the work to find out. But A or B, don't respond to someone defending themselves from slander by slandering them. Right? That's what I'm saying. Sure. And don't attack me. So like if someone slanders me and I defend myself, people come and, oh, how dare you suggest that they're not telling the truth? I'm like, documented the fact that they're not telling the truth. Like, what do you want? And that's the cult of personality stuff that I'm talking about, is that people don't care about whether what I'm saying is true or not. They just care who I'm attacking and who I'm attacking, basically, is all people care about.
Yeah.
I don't care about that. And I don't want people to care about that. I want people to care about who's telling the truth. Just research the truth, fact check shit. That's what I want. And so on the Ascension of Isaiah stuff, I think A or B is just say, like, I don't know, Litwa might have lied about stuff, might have slandered Richard, or Richard might be right, or Richard might be wrong, but I don't know. Or find out, like, do the work and find out. And so that's my position on that going forward. And so I think we don't need to keep talking about.
Yeah, that's fine. It's fair enough. I'll take that point. Now,
I like the Philo thing, because that was the one other thing that I wanted to stick to as an example.
Yeah, let's do it. You said that, Carrie. You said that GE's video was all right. I'm interested to hear how you spin this.
Okay, so this is interesting. That what you just did right now is actually interesting. I've seen you do this several times. You've done it a few times in this video, and you did it before. You did it in your video when you showed a clip of me talking about Philo.
Yeah,
and then you talked about it. You have this tendency to change the meaning of what people say. I actually very clearly didn't say, I think everything in Godless's video is correct. I said most everything or something similar like that. I made a qualified, and this is the thing, is I'm very careful, usually, with my choice of words.
Sure.
Not always, I screw up sometimes, but usually I'm very careful. So I don't say everything. I said, like, most of the stuff in there is pretty spot on. Might be some stuff that's not.
All right.
But you heard that I said everything, right? And just now, like you said, like, like you said everything in that thing is right. And that like throws me for a loop for a moment. Is like, that means there's some sort of communication problem. And you've done this before, like when you said about Philo, you show the video clip from Philo, and people can confirm this just by watching it, which is one of the reasons why I had a problem understanding how this could be a sane reaction to it. But where my wording is very clear, where I don't say that Philo says that the name of the person in that passage is Jesus. I say that Philo says that the person in that passage is this particular angel, and that passage says that it's Jesus, right? And so, and that now, of course, that was just a quick talk. So I'm being very brief. I have all of the passages and stuff. So in my book, I'm more clear about that. But I did carefully couch my words so as to not say, like, I deliberately couched my words so as to not say that Philo says that the name of that character is Jesus. In my book, I am explicit about this and say, like, well, we have to make an argument for this, right? I say, like, I don't say that Philo says that. I say, well, it looks like Philo is saying this, and here are my reasons for thinking that Philo says this, right? So in my book, I'm clear about that.
If we just held people's just what is in their books and let them say things in a speech format in front of people publicly, I mean, what kind of, imagine if the press only was allowed to criticize Donald Trump on what's in his book. Like, if you say things a certain way,
hold on,
it's open for criticism.
I agree to a point, but you're missing what I just said. First, you got what I said wrong in the
I was going to say, I can pull up the clip and we can listen to it.
Yeah, like so if you look at it, like especially if you look at the slide. So I think you showed the slide, and was there a slide? I can't remember in that talk.
It was a slide on the screen, I believe.
Yeah. So the slide on the screen, I think, is even more clear on this about the way it's worded. And it's possible maybe my wording was wrong, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
I'm pretty sure you said that Jesus, the angels actually named Jesus.
Right. Okay. Notice the missing word in that sentence that you just said.
Actually named Jesus?
No, Philo. Philo is not in that sentence. So
are you sure? All right, let's see
if I'm wrong.
No,
you. I mean you just now, like in the last 5 seconds. I mean you on this video live right now.
I'm paraphrasing right now. I'm not.
But no, what I said. No, but you're right. No, what I said was that angel is named Jesus. I did not say Philo says that angel's named Jesus. Do you understand the difference between those two sentences?
I still think that's wrong. I don't think
that's fine. That's fine. But do you understand the difference between those two sentences?
Well,
because you converted one sentence into the other.
Well, I'm pretty sure, and let's look at it. But I'm pretty sure you said that this is what the angel Philo was talking about.
No, I do say that. I think you're missing. God, this is
so what you're saying? Let me clarify.
Yeah.
This. What you're saying is, you never actually say that Philo says the angel's name is Jesus, but Philo's talking about an angel and that angel is named Jesus.
Correct. And there's
okay,
a reason.
Fine. Fair enough.
There's a reason why I say it that way.
But don't you think people might take that, hear this the wrong way still?
But even if they do that, and then I could say like, oh, well, then you misheard me. And then I could explain, right, and tell you. But there's an easy way to check, is to say when a scholar is giving a speech, which is just like a brief of something that they published under peer review, and you think they said something weird, you're like, well, that can't be right. The responsible thing to do is go check the book and say, well, what does he say in the book? Like what was he summarizing? Rather than to say like, oh, well, he's a word slip. Now he's committed to saying something that he never meant to say, and we're going to just condemn him for it. I don't buy that as a proper response. Now, the weird thing though is that you've done this multiple times. You've done it twice in this video. You've done it in that video, where you very easily switch from someone is saying one thing to now someone is saying a much more extreme thing than they actually said. Like you're missing the nuances in their speech. And since you've done that multiple times, I'm going to caution you that maybe you want to look into this and pay more closer attention to it, that this might be getting you into a lot of arguments that you could easily get out of by just parsing people's words better.
Okay, so
or even asking for clarification.
Just in case someone has no idea what we're talking about. Let's play the clip and please clarify if there's any context before or after this clip.
It's also totally possible I said something that I misspoke or whatever, but the slide is clear.
We're going to clarify it all right now. Yeah. Let's get to the truth.
So he tells us this, that there was a pre-Christian Jewish belief in a celestial being named Jesus.
In a celestial being named Jesus.
Celestial being.
I didn't know this was the part. Whatever.
No,
just ignore all this stuff.
So he tells us this, that there was a pre-Christian Jewish belief in a celestial being named Jesus.
In a celestial being named Jesus.
Celestial being named Jesus.
Who was, and he says, these are all the attributes of this pre-Christian Jesus in outer space. He was the firstborn son of God.
Who was the firstborn son of God.
He was the celestial image of God.
The celestial image of God.
He was God's agent of creation.
God's agent of creation.
And he was God's celestial high priest.
And God's celestial high priest.
That wasn't the right clip. But
it corrects the thing that I said. So I did actually phrase it in the way that you took it. So that's my bad. Because I started with just the general statement and then I went into the slide. If you look at the slide, you'll see that it doesn't state it that way. The slide is actually carefully couched.
I'm glad we clarified that right here. That's good.
Yeah, and this would have been so easy though, that you could just check the book and then you wouldn't have to like run off the handle over that. Also, I think
here's the thing though. A lot of mythicists are taking this and running with it. I was one of them. I used to do that. I heard this. That's why I went to that. That's why I knew about this clip. Because I remember watching it.
If people are doing that just off of a single, quick, brief talk, they're being irresponsible, right?
Sure, that's fine. But you can't control the irresponsibility out there.
But what I can do is I can publish things under peer review and hope that people will consult it.
Sure,
right? Like that's what I can do, and that's what I have done. And so, like, if someone gets something wrong like that, I'll correct them. But yes, absolutely. That was a brief, and you're right. The way I phrased it at the beginning of the sentence and that at the podium would have misled you easily on that if you didn't realize that what I was talking about was an argument that's in my book. But so that's okay. It clears that up entirely.
Sure.
But no, let's get to the Philo thing. So
this is interesting.
This is interesting. You did watch Godless's video, right? You watched the whole thing.
Most of it, yeah.
Did you see the part where he talks about your argument that Philo was really referring to Numbers 23?
Yes.
Okay, could you repeat to me what Godless's argument was? You don't have to agree with it.
No, I thought he was talking about my argument though.
So what I'm asking you to do is you don't have to agree with his argument.
I think it would help if I grab Philo right now. I had the text.
Sure, yeah.
Give us the context of why I got the numbers thing.
I've got Young right behind me as well. But yeah, go right to it. We can bring it up online too. I'm bringing up, so for people who are at home, ladies and gentlemen at home, you can Google Philo on the confusion of tongues.
Yeah.
Early Christian writings should come up at the top. This is a digital copy of Young, who's like one of the leading translators of Philo, probably one of the.
This is the one right here.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, this is the best one.
Yeah, I'm looking on the screen because it's just easier, but it's also right behind me. on the shelf somewhere.
Okay.
But
okay. I'm looking at right now, the passage.
So yeah, so people should be aware that this is one of the standard translations by a leading scholar of Philo. Like I think it's the only.
It's the standard text.
It's the only time anyone has translated all of Philo.
Yeah.
So Yang is a Hercules for people who
this is amazing work.
This
is just incredible.
Yeah, and his translation is good too. That's the other thing.
Very good.
I often run into bad translations in classics, for example.
If you can believe it or not, you might not believe this. I've read this entire thing cover to cover.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, yeah.
I love Philo, even though I think he's kind of crazy.
He is, yeah.
But I love it. It's fascinating to me.
But
he's a Platonist all day. He's a Platonist
right. Philo represents a whole school of thought, right?
Exactly.
So it's not just Philo's crazy. It's just like people were in a weird place, back then. Right.
So he's the Septuagint Jew. He's the Septuagint Jew. That's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, he was a well-educated rabbi. He would have known the Hebrew and everything else as well. But
yeah, that's true.
Anyway, So there's a lot of weird stuff in Philo. And in fact, it's educational because you find out like how strangely ordinary, and he was a very respected scholar too. So like he wasn't like some fringe wacko that everybody thought was weird. Like, no, he was highly respected to the point that the Jewish community chose him to be the ambassador to the emperor when certain issues came up.
And
so
Caligula freaked out on him and almost had him all killed. Basically,
there were things. One of his books is really good account of that, at least from his perspective. But anyway, so people who want to do that can bring it up. So that's Confusion of Tongues by Philo, early Christian writings. And then you can just search for the number 62. There's only one instance of it. It's just to helping people at home who want to follow along. So we'll read this here. Now, before I get into this, I'm just going to summarize really quickly. So my argument my position is that Philo is referring to Zechariah 6:12 here. And the person he's talking about, he thinks, is the person in this verse who's named Jesus. Now, I make an argument for that. I don't say that it's just the case. I make an argument for it, and we can get into that later. But that's what I'm saying. And so what he does do, though, this is indisputable, is that he says that there's something in there called the East, Anatole in Greek. There's someone in that passage called that, who he identifies as the firstborn son of God, and he gives a bunch of attributes of this great being. You could find many other passages.
Let's not forget, he says that it's a companion of Moses who utters the speech.
Yeah, but he often uses that phrase to refer to the prophets.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean anything from my point. But even Young agrees it's verse 6:12 of Zechariah that.
Young actually has Numbers 23:7 in the next passage.
I hope.
And I think that context matters. I think this is part of the same topic.
You're going to take that back in 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll see. I don't think so.
Okay, so here it is, 62. I'm just going to read it through. I have also heard of one of the companions of Moses having uttered such a speech as this: "Behold, a man whose name is the East," which is a direct quote from Zechariah 6, verse 12 of the Septuagint. A very novel appellation indeed, if you consider it as spoken of a man who is compounded of body and soul. But if you look upon it as applied to that incorporeal being who in no respect differs from the divine image, you will then agree that the name of the East has been given to him with great felicity. For the Father of the universe has caused him to spring up as the eldest son, whom in another passage he calls the firstborn. And he who is thus born, imitating the ways of his father, has formed such and such species looking to his archetypal patterns. Next sentence. But an example of the worst kind of dawning is afforded by the words used by the man who is willing to curse the people who are blessed by God. Numbers 23:7. For he also is represented as dwelling in the East, and this dawning, have the same name as the former one, has nevertheless an opposite nature to it, and is continually at war with it.
Sure.
Do you follow the problem here?
No, I get that. I'm not saying that that's who he's talking about, but I'm saying he's connecting this prophecy with what Balaam says in Numbers.
He's saying the opposite of that. Do you understand? No, literally, Philo's saying the opposite. He's saying that the Anatole in Numbers is an evil being at war with the other being that he was just talking about.
Right, but I never said that this evil being is who he's speaking about. I'm saying Numbers is where the original
Yeah.
Numbers is where the original context of this East thing comes from, that Zechariah himself is even speaking on.
It was a very rambly
Zechariah is referring back to Numbers.
It sounded like you were arguing that Philo was referring to the Numbers passage, when Philo actually makes the opposite argument of you, where he's saying Philo thinks that the anatole in Numbers is an evil being, not the being he's talking about. Now, I'm just talking about what Philo thinks, right? It's just talking about what Philo thinks.
But Philo's acknowledging that Zechariah's passage
but he's
about the man
saying
from
these
the
are
East.
two different people. You do acknowledge
Sure,
that,
no,
right?
I know that. I get that.
So the anatole in Zechariah 6, for Philo's point of view, is not the anatole in Numbers 23. You agree with that?
I do agree with that.
Okay.
I never said that there was.
You kind of
But what I
implied
said
it,
in my video, what I said in my video is the original context of where all this comes from.
But why does that matter to what Philo thinks? Explain that argument.
Well, the reason why it matters is because Philo's talking about an angel who doesn't have a name at all. It's an incorporeal being with many names. It's not just specific to Zechariah.
That's a self-contradiction. You can't have an angel with no names and have many names.
No. What I'm saying is he doesn't actually name it. It's an angel with many names who's never named. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that therefore one has to make an argument that the person he's referring to is the one named Jesus in that passage. Totally agree that you have to make an argument for that. That's not a given.
Sure. But there's also other passages where because he does talk about, and I'll grant this to you.
I don't understand why you brought up Numbers 23, because that contradicts Philo. Philo is saying that the Numbers passage is referring to a different being. So it can't inform the other passage. Do you understand? Like Philo thinks that someone else, so it has nothing to do with what Philo's talking about.
But that's not what I'm saying, though. What I'm saying is what Philo's acknowledging here, when he's looking at Zechariah, is the origin of this passage actually goes back to Numbers, and he's distinguishing the two.
No, he doesn't say that. He says the opposite of that. Literally,
no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that he said it's the same being. I didn't say that he said it's the same being.
Then I don't understand your argument. What are you arguing? It doesn't apply to anything I've said.
That Balaam's prophecy of a star coming out of the east is coming from Numbers.
Sure.
Zechariah is playing on that, and then Philo's reading it and doing his own analogy or analysis of it.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that someone else thinks something, and you're ignoring the whole question of what Philo thinks, because
we don't know what Philo thinks. We just know what Philo wrote.
No, that's what I mean. We can infer what writers think from what they write. That's the whole function of language. But
it's not clear that this angel's name is Jesus. Though.
I'll grant you it's not clear. I think it is, but that doesn't matter. My point is, you can't refer to Numbers 23 as something that he's talking about in passage 62 and 63. He explicitly denies this. He explicitly says that passage Numbers is talking about a different person, that the word east is the name of two different beings.
Right. I've never denied that. I've never said it was the same being.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just charitably say that you just said it really badly in your video. So
if you go back to what I said in the video that the context of this passage in Zechariah,
it's funny. I think you did the same thing that I did in the video, that clip you brought up.
Sure,
whatever.
If maybe I said it wrong.
I said the sentence wrong and made it sound like I was saying that Philo said a thing, because you definitely give the impression that Philo means the anatole in Numbers 23. That somehow that informs his understanding of what's going on in 62. It doesn't at all. It gives us no information at all about.
I think Philo understands where Zechariah is getting it from. That was my point.
Even if he does, he still thinks that they're two different beings.
Sure, no, I agree with that.
So I don't know the information.
I don't think I've ever said they were the same being.
If you admit that they're different beings, I don't understand your argument.
Well,
this is why it's so unhinged. It doesn't make any sense.
Let me explain that. That's a good question. The reason for me bringing that up is because if we just look at 62 and just clip it out and put it next to on a verse from On Dreams and put that next to another verse from a different book, well, then we can make an argument based off that. But what's the methodology? What's the context of what Philo's actually getting at? He's talking about something bigger. Like, he's not just talking about this one little verse. He's talking about a bunch of shit.
I don't follow how that relates to anything I've said. I don't understand your argument. What are you arguing against?
The next thing you say in order to get to this angel of Jesus, is you go to another passage in On Dreams where it talks about, and I'm going to grant you this. Philo does talk about, not just in On Dreams, probably like 10 times throughout his works.
Yeah, this particular
how the high priest is the image of God.
Yeah, well,
that's what he says. That the high priest is the image of God.
Not the earthly high priest.
Well, he talks about the high priest being of the image of God. He even names Eliezer as one of these people.
Right.
Eliezer,
the earthly image, though. When he talks about this being here, he's talking about something. He says it's incorporeal. It's not the physical priest.
Sure, right here, yeah, okay.
But
that's
in
important.
Other passages, he talks about the high priest of God's. He literally says celestial temple, I think.
Sure, and I actually think that Philo's angel and logos is the angel that's talking to the prophets, not the high priest himself, named Jesus.
Yeah,
in Zechariah, there's an angel talking to Zechariah. Zechariah then relates the stuff to Zerubbabel and Jesus. That's the angel that he's talking about, I think.
Well, okay, yeah, I see what you mean. You can make an argument for that, but
that was my whole thing. I said that in my video too.
That did not come across.
I'll show you. That is very important that you missed that part.
Yeah,
I said that in my video.
That still doesn't explain numbers. Like, I don't see how that gets you numbers. What does numbers have to do?
The whole point of me bringing up numbers was to show you that Philo is acknowledging where all of this stuff comes from in Zechariah.
But it's not. If they're two different beings, they can't be referring to the same thing. So how is that an argument? That's what I don't understand what your argument is.
Well, because it's very Platonic, because you have different. And that's not.
I don't understand. I literally don't understand what you're saying.
Well, you have sort of like a dualism happening here.
Yeah,
you have
good
an
and evil, two different beings.
Yeah, which is sort of a Platonic thing in a way.
Okay, fine.
But I think when it comes to the high priesthood, you have an earthly high priesthood and a heavenly priesthood.
Sure.
And I actually wanted to ask you about this, because this is jumping ahead. Actually, maybe we should wait to this. But I was going to ask you, if there's a crucifixion happening in heaven of Jesus, if we're going with the Platonist worldview, the Middle Platonist worldview, that would reflect something happening on Earth too, don't you think?
Well, that is a bit off topic.
Yeah,
I'll brief that and we can get back to it later. But
all right, we'll get back to it.
Hebrews 9 already tells us what the earthly manifestation of Jesus is. But anyway, Hebrews 9 answers your question. But here, no, I'm just gonna let this lie, because I have no idea, literally no idea, what your argument is about numbers. Like, you've made no sense to me in this video or in your previous one.
The numbers wasn't really that much of part of my argument.
I mean,
against yours.
I mean, it's a weird. It was really weird. I'm just saying it's really weird, and I'm still even here. It's really weird. I literally don't understand what you're arguing, or even what you're arguing against. I have no idea what you're talking about. I understand when you say sentences. I understand what those sentences mean, but I don't understand what you're supposed to infer from them, like what they even have anything to do with my argument. Anyway, I think we're not going to get anywhere.
One sentence of my argument compared.
I mean, you spent a few paragraphs on the numbers stuff, but and that was really weird.
Well, that's because the origin, the Christians. This is important actually, because Christians use Balaam's prophecy for Jesus. One of the oldest depictions of Jesus that we have is the Balaam verse.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with Philo. I really don't understand what this.
But Philo's acknowledging that the verse in Zechariah originates from this verse in Numbers. That was my point.
No, he's not. He's saying it can't possibly, because it's referring to two different beings, so they cannot be referencing each other. Cannot. It's literally impossible. That's what Philo is saying. He's saying they're two different beings.
I'm not saying that it's the same being. I'm saying the first time you hear about from the east is in Numbers. Then you hear about it again in Zechariah.
And what does Philo say about this? He says that these are referring to two different beings. He doesn't say.
Right. I've already acknowledged that.
Right. He doesn't say that Numbers 23 refers to the same thing. So I don't understand why referring to Numbers 23 helps us at all.
I don't even know why you're still. That's not even.
It doesn't make any sense. Your argument.
That wasn't even the crux of my argument, though. My argument is that. My argument is this.
That isn't my problem.
The man who's from the east, seated in Babylon, is not Jesus. The one who's of the Davidic line is not Jesus. The builder of the temple is also not Jesus. That's the ruler. That's the prince.
I understand all those arguments.
Right.
That
was my point.
To do with numbers. I don't see numbers coming up in there.
Numbers had nothing to do with what I was saying after that. That was all I was doing. All I was pointing out.
I'm asking you to explain the argument about numbers.
I just did. All I was pointing out to you.
You just said you didn't, and now you just said you did.
Then listen to what I'm saying. Then listen to what I'm saying. The point
try it again.
Include
the word numbers in your sentence, please.
Is that if we take the book on the Confucianist tongues in its full context, we can't just take out 62 by itself. There's something. There's more being said about this stuff, and I just wanted to put that in the video. That's it.
What the more that is being said, either supports or doesn't contradict anything I've said. So that's why I don't understand why you brought it up. I don't understand. I still don't know what your argument is. Literally, it makes no sense. I've struggled.
I don't know what else to
get
tell
it.
you. I've explained it to you already.
I think we're at loggerheads. I don't think there's just, you can't come up with a way to frame it in English that makes any sense to me. I don't know what your argument is. Let's go back to what my argument is then. Let's compare arguments. If everybody at home hopefully understood your argument, and I'm just.
But if you go back to Numbers and you actually look at what's being said, it talks about the mountain of the east.
Sure,
so that's
but it's a different being.
I get that. It's a different being.
What does it have to do with passage 62?
The only reason why I put it in there is to show that there's more being said about this than just what's in Zechariah.
Which has nothing to do with anything.
But this illustrates that it's not just about Zechariah and Jesus. There's more being said. This angel is not Jesus. That was the point of it.
Passage isn't referring to this angel. Philo says explicitly it's not referring to this angel, so it cannot inform us at all about what Philo thinks about this angel. If Philo's not even talking about a specific person in general with a specific name, then how can you conclude that it's just based on the high priest? Okay, that's a different question. That is an intelligible question. Doesn't resolve the thing that we were doing before. It still makes no sense what you're talking about. But
I already answered that.
No, you really haven't. So what Philo does here in 64 and 65 is he talks about numbers, says this is about the opposite being, it's a different being. This has nothing to do with my argument. I cannot see any connection between this and what Philo is talking about in 62. What Philo says in 62 and 63 is that in that case, unlike numbers, in the Zechariah case, it's talking about the firstborn son of God, which is this thing that we know from other passages that Philo identifies as the celestial high priest. So here's my argument. And you never respond to my argument, so it shows that you don't know what my argument is. But anyway, here's my argument, is that Philo thinks, he clearly thinks here, that whoever's called East in Zechariah 6 is the Son of God and the high priest, the celestial high priest. We know that for a fact. Philo thinks, he says it's the same angel, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't say that no, that's not what he says, though.
Well, okay, so he says he's the Son of God. It's right there. It's literally right there in verse 63 of Philo.
Yeah, he also says, behold, the man whose name is the East.
And he says that East refers to the firstborn son of God, the incorporeal being who in no respect differs from the divine image. Yeah.
Okay.
Acknowledge that. I just want to make sure you
No, we're on the same page now. Okay.
Now,
how do you get to that?
Starting to go insane there. All right.
How do you get to that being Jesus?
I'm getting there. All right. So I'm shocked you don't know the answer to this.
No, anyway, I know it. I want you to say it though.
Okay. All right. Oh, no, that makes sense. Okay. If that's what you mean, then yeah, absolutely. I totally advocate that kind of discourse. All right. Anyway, so he thinks whoever in this passage is called the East, he thinks, and the reason he thinks they're called the East in this passage is because he thinks the person who's called the East is the firstborn son of God and the celestial high priest, because that's who this being is, we know from Philo's writings.
Where else are you getting this from?
Other passages, which you even cite in your video, where he identifies, he makes clear that this firstborn son of God, the same angel, is also the celestial high priest. So do you acknowledge that in other passages? In
other passages, but what kind of methodology are we doing when we're just pulling out passages from Philo for different topics in different books?
They're not different. When Philo talks about the same angel in different places, so it's just like Paul talks about Jesus in different places and doesn't list all of Jesus' attributes in every place, but you can assemble all the attributes of Jesus.
He also mentions that this high priest Eleazar is he's basically like the image of God. Why don't we say the angel's name is Eleazar then?
Because here he's talking about an incorporeal being who is called the firstborn son of God. And Philo elsewhere says that being, specifically that being, is the high priest of the celestial temple.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Do you understand that? So I
understand that.
In 62 and 63.
I've said that in my video too.
He cannot mean an earthly priest. Philo cannot mean.
So it can't be Jesus.
I think Zechariah did. I think
so. It can't be Jesus then, who's an earthly priest.
Well, this is all
right. Finish your thought.
We're not talking about Christians. We're talking about Philo. All we want to establish is what does.
I'm talking about Philo. I am talking about Philo.
Right. Yeah, but this Philo doesn't know anything about Jesus. So Jesus Christ. So let's not get into Christian belief. It's just.
I didn't say that.
kind of did. But anyway,
no, I didn't. I'm
so
talking about Philo.
you referenced Christian belief, but all right, so forget it. Doesn't matter.
No, I didn't. I said you can't say that the angel's name is Jesus because he's talking about a celestial high priest, and then in one verse he references Zechariah. So therefore, let's look through Zechariah and find who the high priest is. That's just weird methodology.
No, it's not. Like so if here, give me an analogy. So in two different places, Paul says Jesus is the creator of the universe. He says that in 1 Corinthians 8. Like, do you acknowledge that? Like,
sure.
He says, yeah. And then in a completely different passage, in a completely different book, he says Jesus is the seed of David. So, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is it valid procedure to say that Paul believes that Jesus is both the creator of the universe and the seed of David, right? Is that a valid method? Have I done something correct?
Sure.
This is exactly what I'm doing with Philo. Do you follow? Philo repeatedly
Philo's written more than the Old Testament.
Yeah, it's not relevant. Philo, no.
If
Philo,
I can use the same methodology to make the angel name Eliezer.
Philo talks about this angel a lot. He likes this angel.
Yes, he talks about this logos a lot. I agree with you.
When Paul talks about Jesus in completely different places and gives different attributes to Jesus in those places, we can infer that Paul believes that Jesus has both those attributes. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree with that.
So when Philo talks about the same being, the archangel of many names in many places, and talks about different attributes of it in different places, we can infer that Philo thinks that angel has all of those attributes.
Yes.
Thank you.
But he never says the name of it. He just says he has many names.
It doesn't matter. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you got to that point.
Okay.
So you agree with this one thing, that Philo thinks that whoever is being called East in this passage is the Son of God and the celestial high priest. Do you agree with that fact?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. There is only one person in that passage who is called the Son of God and high priest. What is their name?
Well, you're talking about in Zechariah 6:12?
Correct.
Well, he's not talking about the high priest in this passage. He's
that's not the question I'm asking.
Talking about the angel.
Philo thinks that the person in this verse. Now I'm talking about what Philo thinks.
Okay, all right.
I'm not talking about what Zechariah the author meant. I'm not talking about what other Jewish exegetes thought. I'm not talking about Christians thought.
No, I'm talking about Philo too.
I'm only talking about Philo. So Philo thinks that whoever in this passage is called the East is the Son of God and a high priest. Right. So who in this passage is a son of God and high priest?
This is gonna I don't know how you're gonna respond to this, but this passage is actually about both Jesus and Zerubbabel.
I totally understand what you're talking about.
Okay, I'm glad you understand this.
We're talking about you're talking about the original, what Zechariah the author meant.
Because you have to put it in. There's actually some versions of this text that put Zerubbabel in it.
Yeah, Zechariah the author does not think anyone is an incorporeal being who's the firstborn son of God. That's not Zechariah at all.
Okay, but here's the
thing. Philo is getting something completely different out of this passage.
First of all, we don't know what the Septuagint version that Philo had said. We lost that. What we have today is not the same.
Yeah, but
this particular verse is so vastly different in different versions.
Here's the problem: is that it agrees with the Hebrew. So if text has been lost, it was lost before being translated into Greek, right? Because the error predates it. So his passage almost certainly read very similar to ours. In fact, there's one word difference that he gives in his quotation, which might indicate a variant reading, but it's not relevant to what we're talking about
now.
But the thing is that to infer what Philo is talking about when he says there is someone in this passage called the East, and you might wonder, like, why does he think that? Why would Philo think that there's someone in this passage called the East?
Yeah. And
then Philo tells us the reason he thinks that is because that person is the Son of God and the high priest.
Well, it doesn't say that he's the high priest in this. He's not talking about that in this verse. That matters.
Hence the point of my prior point about Paul and Jesus.
I get that.
So Philo believes that the angel that is being talked about here is the high priest. Yes? Philo's belief. Philo believes that.
Wait. I don't
Whoever
think so.
Is called
I don't
East
think
here.
so, because in this verse right here, he doesn't say anything about a high priest.
Oh my God.
But
this is tiring.
No, I get what you're saying. If you put this next to another verse where he talks about celestial high priest, you can make an argument that this is what he's talking about. Sure.
We have to go that you're using the wrong method. So what we're
No,
trying to
I
do,
want to go back to what you asked about this
exactly.
verse in
what we're trying to
6:12.
do, what we're trying to do is understand what Philo thinks, right?
Yes.
And to understand what Philo thinks, we have to pay attention to the things he's written, right?
Right.
Just like with Paul. So when Paul says that Jesus is the seed of David in one place, and he says he's the creator in another place, we can validly infer that he thinks Jesus is both of those things. We can do that here with Philo. Philo talks about this angel in many places. He gives attributes in many places. So we know that Philo thinks that this angel he's talking about has all of those attributes. We don't need him to keep repeating all of the attributes in this place any more than we need Paul to do that for Jesus.
Okay.
Right? There's no need for him to do that.
Let's get into what this verse actually means.
Correct. So we know that Philo thinks, for whatever reason, it could be a wackadoo reason.
Who is the man called the East? Who do you think it is?
Who does Philo think it is? He tells us. He actually writes it. It's right here. He says he thinks it's the Son of God, who we know he thinks is the high priest of the celestial temple. So the only way he would think someone in this passage was correctly called the East, because they're the firstborn son of God and the high priest, is because he thinks that whoever's called East is the Son of God and high priest in that passage. Because
here's what the passage says, though.
Yeah,
here's a man whose name is the East, and he will build the temple of the Lord.
Actually, you have to start further back.
Okay.
Take
silver and gold.
Yeah.
Make it a crowns.
You need the name.
Set it on the head of high priest Jesus, son of Jochazedek.
Yes, which means son of God, by the way.
Yes. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
And you are to tell him that this is the Lord of hosts. Here is a man whose name is the East.
Yeah, and this actually reminds me to cite something. Wouldn't
you agree that this is explaining an anointing ceremony?
You're talking about what Zechariah meant, not what Philo thinks.
But why wouldn't Philo know what Zechariah meant?
Oh my God, you don't know anything about Pesher logic?
It doesn't matter what Pesher logic says.
You claim to have read Philo entirely.
Yeah, but he's not doing that.
He does not interpret any fucking verse in the Bible.
We can't just assume that he's doing that here. We don't know that.
We totally know we can, because he's written like 800 pages in which all he does is interpret Bible verses in weird fucking ways.
So why doesn't he say that then? Why doesn't he Philo does this no, hold on a second. Philo does this all the time, and he explains what he's talking about. And he goes through it. He doesn't leave you with a mystery for you to explain it yourself.
It's not a mystery because he doesn't care whether the name is Jesus or not.
He writes about the name Jesus. He could have said it right then and there. This is the highest name of all.
You're assuming that Philo knows about Christianity and cares.
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah. No, there's no reason.
If Philo really had named this incorporeal being, he would tell us that. He just doesn't do that.
I mean, he is telling us that indirectly. He's saying that
I don't think so. I don't see it that way.
Yeah, he's literally saying that whoever is called the East in this passage,
which
is the Son of God. But it's not. But there's no Zerubbabel in there. That is an. It
doesn't matter. We know what's happening in this passage.
Zechariah. There's
Zechariah, 2 crowns being made. There's 2 crowns being made,
and put them both on the head. Yeah,
you don't put 2 crowns on one person's head. You put one on.
Yes, you actually can. But anyway,
that's not what the Jews do.
Well, the Revelations, refers
to the high priest anoints the prince. That's what's happening here.
Yeah,
Zerubbabel, in context,
I'm not going to get into that because that's not what Philo.
That matters though. And Philo would know this. Philo's the scholar, like you said. He knows all this stuff.
But it doesn't matter because Philo is doing Pesher logic here. He is weirdo. He actually thinks that Zechariah was talking about an incorporeal being. So he certainly wasn't talking about Zerubbabel. He couldn't.
The angel that's talking to Zechariah. That's what he's talking about.
And he's saying, "Oh, I see what you mean." So he's saying that he's the East. Yeah, but he doesn't say that, right? So there is someone in this. So why would Philo think that? Like, why would he say that? And there's only one person in that verse who's called a high priest and the Son of God. And so we know Philo thinks that this Son of God is the high priest.
Sure.
So that is the argument, that he thinks that whoever's being called East. So he is misreading the passage. And actually, I found in preparation for this, I found that this has already passed peer review before. Not only did my argument pass peer review, but it passed peer review again by another author.
I'm sure it did.
Daniel Sandanandas in Johannine Exegesis of God. He says that the interpretation is that the angel is telling Zechariah to put the crowns on Jesus and announce this of Jesus, so that the Anatole is Jesus in this passage. And he cites other scholars that concur.
There was actually,
I didn't check them.
Check me on this, but I'm 99% sure that there is peer-reviewed material that says that Zerubbabel is the one getting crowned here.
That material is referring to what Zechariah meant, not what Philo was talking about.
Right. But that's where we're at odds at, because
I think Philo thinks. Philo thinks this
when Philo does
thing.
Pesher, he explains it to you. He doesn't just do it randomly.
He doesn't list every freaking thing. He's referring to the verse. Though. He's cued you with the verse. He's told you this is a firstborn son of God. He doesn't add the mention that he's a high priest, but we know that Philo believes that. And so we can infer what Philo is doing. The logic that Philo is applying here is that somehow he thinks Zechariah is talking about an incorporeal firstborn son of God, high priest of the celestial temple. Absolutely no way is that what Zechariah was talking about. Not in there. But Philo thinks he is. And he thinks there's someone in this passage who is the son of God and the high priest. And there's one person named in this passage who is both high priest and son of God. So there's evidence for the fact that he thinks he thinks that Zechariah is saying, behold, he's putting this crown on Jesus and saying, behold the East. Yes, absolutely. This is weird. Philo is the fact that he thinks that this is some sort of celestial being and so forth. That is strange. And Philo, if you look at all of Philo's works, he gets bizarre interpretations out of passages of the Old Testament, like all the time. So in no way is he doing what modern scholars do and try to figure out what Zechariah originally meant. Philo never really does that. He only finds these weird mystical meanings of things. And of course, he's also looking, we think, at a corrupt text. We think Zerubbabel was probably in the original verse. We can't prove that. We have no examples of that. But it is logical that that's what's going on. But you have to remember also that Philo being the idea that he thinks this is the creator of the universe. So the idea that someone built the temple of God, you see the thinking here, how Philo could easily think that this is Jesus, the son of God, the high priest that is being talked about as the East. That's how he's reading the verse. We can totally say he's wrong. He's totally wrong. No way Zechariah meant that. It's not what Zechariah wrote.
I get the argument.
I'm
fine with it.
Right. So, but
I'm not sold by it though, but I get what you're saying.
That's fine. But you never mention or respond to this argument. Like you didn't even know that this was my argument. And
no, I kind of do. No, I pretty much do know what you're getting.
But it wasn't
said in my video. Once we get to On Dreams, and it lists there that there's the high priest thing. I said in my video, this is what Carrier is getting at with the high priest thing.
I think
I said it exactly like that.
Okay, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. It was in a different section. Yeah, you kind of bounced around between different things. It was very confusing. That is true. Anyway, so that's my argument. Sure. And there are other scholars under peer review who agree with that. So that's
now.
That.
Let me ask you this. But let's assume that for the sake of argument, let's assume that you're right. Philo thought it was Jesus. Never says it though. Never makes any message of it.
Yeah. He just cites the verse.
How do you use this again to prove mythicism against Christianity? Are you saying that?
I literally don't. So
then
this is in my section on background knowledge. I make very clear at the beginning of that section, which is actually in chapter 4, which begins the 2 chapters, I should say, on background knowledge, and there are 48 numbered elements. And in the beginning, I explained that the background knowledge does not tell the difference to us between whether Jesus existed or not, because every single 48 item thing in there is compatible with a historical Jesus, right? So even if you agreed with me that Philo's talking about a Jesus who had all these angelic properties, that is in no way an argument for historists or for mythicism, because Christians could just simply believe that Jesus was their Jesus was an incarnation of this Jesus, right? Exactly. In fact, they could totally have renamed him Jesus for this purpose. Like we don't have to assume that Jesus was his given name. He might have been walking around being called Emmanuel or whatever. Like his actual name could have been anything. And then, or he might have said, I'm going to call myself the Jesus now so that it lines up. And I actually make an argument for this.
It's a possibility.
Yeah. Because Josephus actually, in fact, this is a thing that I'll talk about in live. I'm going to advertise Derek's next live stream. We're going to talk about what I think are the most probable historical Jesuses.
I'm interested to see how you do that.
And I've actually done this already. It's my favorite talk. Is my Wichita talk. You're all going to die. Is the title of it. You can find it on YouTube. It's one of my favorite talks. But we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to talk about it seriously. The talk is tongue in cheek and kind of funny intentionally, but and yet it's kidding on the square because everything in it is true. But anyway, Josephus very clearly shows that there's various messianic figures, the Egyptian, Theudas, etc. And Josephus never calls them messiahs. Carefully, he never does. But he talks about them in ways that a Jew would immediately recognize. It's like, this guy's talking about messianic pretenders. He calls them pretenders. But,
yeah, exactly.
What are they pretending to be? What do you know? They're pretending to be messiahs. So, but he conspicuously, and by the way, this isn't me saying this. This is multiple scholars, other scholars that I cite in my book, but it's in OHJ. You can find it. The Josephine Christs in chapter 6. I'll search for it. But if you read chapter 6, alternative classes, I think the alternative class objection is when I talk about it. And I reference other pages in the book about it. But anyway, he depicts each one of these figures doing something that Joshua did. So parting us, or doing or claiming that they would do. Let's be clear. Something that Joshua did, like part the sea or magically topple walls of a city, etc. Very conspicuously. So what he's saying is that these messianic pretenders were pretending to be the new Joshua. Hence, like we're going to reconquer Israel, right? We're going to be the new Joshua. Well, you and I know Joshua is Jesus, right? It's the same name. We spell it differently for no good reason in English. But anyway, so Josephus knows all of these Jesus Christs. These are literally Jesus Christ. They're all pretending to be Joshua. They're all claiming to be Christ, because Christ means Messiah. So he doesn't say they're doing this. He just tells us they're doing things so that anybody who knows goes, they're being Joshua's. These are Christ's. These are Joshua Christ's. Holy cow. So I think the most probable historical Jesus is that our Jesus was just one of these guys.
That's interesting.
The same thing, right? He's doing the same thing, but he was so less effective in his own, and so less known in his own day that Josephus didn't. It wasn't on his Josephus radar, right? So Josephus, it's obvious that he picks ones that led to military disasters, right? So there's huge military actions involved in a lot of these guys, and that never happened with Jesus. So I think that'd be one reason why he just wouldn't bother talking about Jesus. Is it's not relevant to him, even if he knew about Jesus. But he might not have even heard of him, because there'd be so many of these guys, Josephus wouldn't have heard of all of them. Anyway, that's my thinking, right? And so it'd be entirely plausible for this. Let's say, and I argue in that talk,
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's the most plausible historical Jesus. And I also argue in that talk that I think that these guys were trying to get themselves killed on purpose. I think they all believed that Daniel 9, where it says that a Messiah will die and that will start the doomsday clock.
They thought they were the one. Right.
They all thought they were the one. So they were trying to get themselves killed. And Jesus might have done the same thing, and he got himself killed, but it wasn't spectacular enough to get on Josephus's radar, right? So anyway, I think that's the case. Now, if that's the case, it would totally make sense. Let's say that happens, right? And you got our Jesus. Let's say his name is Caleb. I don't know. Whatever his given name is, doesn't matter. He's unknown before any of this starts, right? And then he knows about, and he's called rabbi repeated in the Gospels. So it's entirely plausible that he was an educated rabbi, and the Gospels just depict him as a peasant. But so he could have read Philo, read this, and said, "Ooh, yeah, Jesus is going to be the Messiah." And this could even be something that Jews talked about, like angelological mysticism going rampant. They could have been talking about this passage or others and things. And you go, all right, I'm going to rename myself Jesus to match up with this. It's a common enough name. No one will be suspicious. And then go around claiming I'm the guy, right? And then that could have been a strategy, right? So we don't even have to think that Jesus was just coincidentally named Jesus. He might have been deliberate. He might have deliberately taken the name.
And this is going to add to your point. Don't forget that Philo, when he's writing about names, what's the name of the book again? I can't remember. It's On Names, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's called On Names. Anyways,
yeah.
When he gets the name Jesus, Joshua, he says, this is the name of Yahweh's salvation, one of the greatest names of all. Only the great men. So someone like what you're saying might read that and say,
right,
this has got to be my name now.
Which, that ties into another thing. And this is Bob Price gets the hat tip for this. And this is much debated by scholars in the field. So be cautious with this, everyone. In Philippians, there is a moment there where it says that it seems to say, and it is a little ambiguous, but it does seem to say that after Jesus was resurrected, he was given the name Jesus, the name above all names.
Yeah.
Which would tie into that. So in that model, let's say that's what happened. Jesus didn't pick the name for himself. He went by something else. And after he died, people go, okay, we're going to declare this guy the guy. And so we're going to say God gave him the name above all names, which is Jesus. And oh, look, that ties up with Philo's thought about who's going to be the Messiah, etc. My point of all this is that Philo thought that there was an archangel that had all these attributes and that he was named Jesus, could have caused the historical Jesus and the origins of Christianity. In no way does it tell us whether that's what happened or whether Jesus didn't exist, right?
Sure.
All it tells us is that the Christians already had an available model to work with. And I also make the point, and I've made this point clearer in Jesus from Outer Space because I think people have missed it, but what Philo does is, one thing we can't dispute is that certainly Paul thinks this angel that Philo, even if Philo thinks it's not the Jesus in the passage, even if Jesus isn't on the list of items that Philo thinks is an attribute of this angel, Paul and Philo are talking about the same angel. Paul thinks Jesus is the incarnation of this angel.
Sure.
Right. So
I just think
that it would
I just
have
wish
the name.
Philo would specify. He says he has many names. If he would specify it was Jesus, that would make a lot more sense.
I think you'll notice
that's why I'm not sold on that.
I think you'll notice he rarely talks about the names of angels and is very couched when he does. And here he only talks about one name.
The angel has many names. He specifically says that.
And here he does let one go. He says the name is East, right? So, but there's a reason why the Jews didn't like the idea of openly talking about the names of angels. And we have this at the Qumran scrolls. There was this idea that the angels had all these secret names and it was a bad idea to go blabbing about it, right? So Philo actually rarely talks about the names of angels. He does occasionally, but it's not his thing. What he does is he talks about their attributes, and that's how he identifies them usually. And that's what he's doing here. So here, like the fact that Jesus is in this verse, you could forget that, and yet you still have the fact that Philo is establishing that there is an angel that Christians could believe their Jesus was the historical incarnation of. So it's totally compatible with historicity. It doesn't tell us anything about whether Jesus existed or not. All it does is it gives us a model. It gives us an explanation for why Christians would come up with this weird teaching about Jesus. And having the name in there already just makes it all the more clear, I think. And that's just as compatible with historicity as it is with mythicism.
Yeah. And another reason why I just wish there was more, it would be clear if he had a name for it. You have in the other book called Who is the Heir of Divine Things, where he talks about Eliezer being interpreted, God is my helper. And he says, which is filled with blood, being itself easily dissolved and dead, has existence through, is kept alive by providence of God, who holds his arm and shield of defense over it. While our race cannot, by any resources of its own, exist in a state of firmness and safety for a single day, do not see that this second of the sons of Moses has also the same name as this man. Says the scripture, it was Eliezer. So, I mean, he's talking about a lot of high priests in this book, and I think he's sort of like saying these heavenly priests, they have a little piece in them that's resembling of what God wants as a high priest.
They are the Platonic,
as above, so below type of thing, right?
Yeah, that's totally true. But notice when Philo talks about the archangel that he's talking about, the archangel of many names, the logos, etc., he gives us attributes. Like he talks about this angel a lot, and he talks about attributes. But like you notice, he like rarely ever says anything about any of their names, right? So we already know he doesn't like being explicit about their names. And in this one instance, he's only interested in the one name, the East. Oh, it's appropriate that he's called the East, etc. So we expect him to be a bit hush-hush about all the names of this angel, right? He's not interested in telling you what the other name is, because he's only interested in this name, right? He's interested in explaining why is he called the East in this case. And so he's just explaining that. And he's not really interested in this case that he's also given the name above all names, which is Yahweh saves, right? So
but with that being said, though, don't you think it's a little bit of a stretch that people would also interpret it and go, okay, Philo's angel is G? Like, we're kind of digging in to find all this. Do you think it's that clear? Maybe you do. I don't see it that clear.
I do, but I don't think it's so clear that we have to say that it's certain knowledge, right? And that's why in my book, I make clear that I'm talking about something that we can infer, right? I'm not talking about something that Philo said, but things we know Philo said is all these other attributes. So we know the Christians think Jesus is this angel. And so the question of whether there was already a name of Jesus known for this angel.
Okay.
That's a separate question. And it doesn't really inform us about mythicism or historicity. But it does eliminate one argument against mythicism, which is the idea that, like, where would Christians just come up with this idea? And it's like, well, they didn't, because it's in Philo.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And
because a lot of mythicists take this and run with it as if it's like Philo had an angel named Jesus, and we know this. And
let me explain why that is. Right, is because most people get the sort of Christian apologetics version of Christianity and of Christian history, and there's a lot of Habermas bullshit out there, right, about what Jews would never say or do or whatever. That's completely false. Scholars take the other stuff for granted, right? They know that none of those things are true, but they take that for granted and forget that the public doesn't know these things. So once you find out that Paul thinks that Jesus was a pre-existent celestial being who became incarnate, and he does believe that he becomes a man, he becomes flesh, he becomes Jewish flesh even. That's indisputable. Once they find out that, and that was already an angel believed in history, and that angel might have already been named Jesus, like that opens your eyes to think, oh, all the Christian apologetic stuff I've been told no longer makes sense. So mythicism is actually plausible. It's in the game now, right?
Okay.
It doesn't prove that mythicism is true, but it does put it back in play.
I'm fine with that.
And that's why people will cite it. Like they'll say, like, this is the thing that like changed my mind about this. And it's not like anyone would say, like, oh, that's the fact. That's it. That did it for me. Like they'll list other things, right? They'll say other things, like you stack things up, then I get there, right? But so like this one thing, all it does is it loosens the door open, right? And
Sure.
so that's why people will cite it, and that's why you'll find it mentioned a lot, especially on the internet. But anyway, that's what I argue in the book. And so, but you never really address anything in the book, right? And none of I still don't understand the numbers argument. It doesn't make any sense. I don't see how it argues against anything I said. I think you confused a lot the different questions of what Zechariah meant versus what Philo thinks Zechariah meant.
But I still
and we already know Philo doesn't agree with what Zechariah originally meant, because he thinks that Zechariah is talking about this weird being, and that's not what Zechariah is talking about, right? So we already know Philo doesn't he doesn't truck with Zechariah's original intent. So when scholars try to reconstruct Zechariah's original intent, they're not doing what Philo's doing. Philo's doing something else. So we have to separate those two things. And so I think that's the main, I think the place where you slipped a lot in this is that you switch between those two illogically too many times. And then the numbers thing made no sense. I still don't understand how that refers to anything we're talking about. And then I think it comes down
to Philo, who's, if he really is doing this Pesher right now, you would think he would explain this better and not just sort of give you a little nugget.
Philo is often brief and cryptic. I mean, the whole text
sometimes, but a lot of times when he's doing Pesher, he'll explain it away. And if it's something this important,
he doesn't, not more than this, right? Like, yeah, the things for him. Well, that's the thing. That's a good point. You said important. Important to who, right? Like,
well, to Philo, this is important. Philo's all about the logos.
The only thing that's important to Philo in this passage is the East, the name the East. That's the only name that's important to Philo in this, and that it associates with this one particular archangel. And he tells us why. That's why that's important to Philo. The fact that the name is also Jesus in there is not what Philo's writing about. It's not his point. It has nothing to do with anything he's saying here. It has nothing to do with anything he needs to convey here. Like, that's not important to him here. Here, he's only interested in the other name, the East. Right. So then it's only about that. So there's nothing weird about the fact that he doesn't say the word Jesus, like that's because that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the other name. That's why, but you can infer it because he thinks whoever in this passage is called the East is a high priest and the Son of God. And conveniently, by incredible coincidence, there is a named person in that verse who is both of those things. And that's a weird, really weird coincidence, unless Philo is thinking that that's who he's talking about. Right.
Sure. I can see that. I can try to see that. I'm not sold by it. I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think from the way you've interacted so far, I think you would benefit most from the article I did, the second article about Hurtado. So I did this, and this is for the audience too. I did an article called, I might get the title wrong, but if you keyword it in my blog search, you'll find it. The difference between a historian and an apologist. And I analyzed the debate. I did an heresiology thing where I analyzed the debate between Hurtado and I. It wasn't an official debate. It was just an exchange of angry words, but we just rage blogged each other. But anyway, but I analyzed the debate. But in that process, I go through the step-by-step, the logic, and it's where the logic of my argument and why coincidence as the alternative, it matters as far as probabilities, because I use a Bayesian epistemology, which is when you look at evidence, you ask, what is the probability of that evidence on the hypothesis being true? And then you stack that in a ratio to the probability of that same evidence on some other hypothesis being true. So you're testing two alternative hypotheses.
Sure.
So when one hypothesis requires a remarkable coincidence, by definition, the probability of the evidence goes down because you have to account for the improbability of the coincidence.
Sure.
And when the other probability is 100%, because it's exactly what you expect on the hypothesis, this is a heavy stack. It's actually, that's strong evidence, because usually you're talking 2 to 1, 5 to 1, 10 to 1, strong evidence. In comparison to the ascension of Isaiah, which I count as 9 to 10, which is weak T, like that's super, super weak evidence for mythicism. And I talk about the logic, the math on that in the Litwa piece that I did recently. So I have the first section is all about this. So 9 to 10 ratio odds is in favor of a theory is terrible evidence, but it is weak. I mean, it's evidence, but it's weak. What we want is like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 5 to 1. Ideally, we want like thousands to 1 or millions to 1. That's like, modern historians work with that kind of field of evidence. Ancient historians aren't that lucky. But anyway, that's why I say that the coincidence factor matters. It matters to the logic of how you get to the probability of your conclusion.
Sure.
So I think you might benefit from reading that article, the Hurtado article.
Definitely, we'll check it out.
Yeah.
Let me ask
you
this,
if you
though.
disagree with the rest of it, but
I seen a post floating around on social media. You commented on it too, and it was basically someone saying that, in testing the historicity of Jesus, only a historian has the tools for this, and a Bible scholar has no tools for this. But don't you agree that when we're examining Paul,
do you remember what my comment was?
Your comment was you kind of agreed with it a little bit. I think you said, and you added your own little. I wish I had it in front of me. I don't have it.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because I don't recall this, and I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Well, I'm just going to ask you instead of bringing it up. I'll just ask you right now. Wouldn't you agree that examining Paul and what Paul meant by certain things takes biblical scholarship, especially like phrases like "born of a woman"? Like someone who doesn't know this phrase might not know that it's used in the community rules in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's used in the Book of Thomas. It's used in the book of not Deuteronomy, Lamentations, used in the book of Job.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that Paul doesn't use the same verb. Now, I know this is the point of contention. And it's important also to note that I still, after everything, count this as evidence for historicity. So I do not think that my argument on this is so decisive that it destroys.
So when you're weighing in your Bayesian analysis, you put
it's 2 to 1 in favor. I count it as 2 to 1 in favor. Now it's on the upper error margin. On the lower error margin, I'm more pro-mythicist, but the point of an error margin is that I cannot be certain that the probability is below the top of my margin, right? I'm just saying that I'm accounting for the possibility of my being wrong. So I can say that I think the probability is much less, but at the most reasonable in favor of historicity that I can allow, I have to put it up to 2 to 1. And I have to accept that that's the probability, because there's the error margin is so wide. So my uncertainty, it falls below that. So that's why I say like 1 in 3 chance that there's a historical Jesus is my conclusion. And I think that's worst case scenario given everything I've argued, right? And that on that side of the error margin, I count this evidence as 2 to 1. So in favor of historicity. But I don't count it as like, say, 5 to 1. Because of all the ambiguities. For example, that Paul chooses to use a different verb, even in the same chapter as he refers to human births with genao, he still chooses to use ginomai. And Paul's idiom throughout his letters, he never uses ginomai of human birth. He himself only ever uses genao.
This particular verse I've brought to my teacher who was teaching me Greek. I taught actually another person as well who speaks fluent Greek. And it's the way he wrote it out. It's the sentence structure is the reason why he chooses that verb.
Yeah, there's no doubt. That's not really true either. Because he says kind of the same thing about us using genao a few verses later. So when he talks about us being born, he uses genao. When he talks about Jesus, he could totally use genao.
The sentence structure in this particular verse is set up in a way that genao made more sense. That's what I've been told.
You mean ginomai made more sense?
Look, I'm just learning Greek this year to start.
Yeah, but I just wanted to be clear. You mean ginomai made
more sense.
Ginomai,
sorry. Yeah. That's what I've been told by 2 different experts in Greek.
That's weird, because that contradicts the argument that he's aping the Septuagint, right? If he's aping the Septuagint phrase, which it's repeated multiple times in the Septuagint, it's always genao. So, and Paul can construct his sentences any way he wants, right? So that he's not forced to defy the Septuagint idiom. He could just use the Septuagint idiom and then construct the rest of the sentence to fit it, right?
But Paul's writing to a Greek audience.
Yeah, but
Okay, go
But
ahead.
the thing is that Paul is choosing. He's making a choice here. He's choosing to
Sure.
use this. He's choosing to change the idiom. He's made a weird choice, right? And
Sure.
so this again is like another coincidence thing. Like
I get
what
what
are the
you're saying.
odds that he would defy the idiom by changing the verb, and then change the verb in just a peculiar way that matches some other things? And this is one thing. Like Bart Ehrman really kind of agrees with me. I don't think he's openly admitted it, but he said this in The Orthodox Corruption of Scripture, that what I'm talking about is exactly right, because other scribes later kept trying to change this verb. And in fact, the same scribes were trying to change it in Romans 1. They were bothered by the fact that he used ginomai, and they wanted to change it to ginao.
Yeah.
So the fact that they recognized that this was a problem for them and that they had to coordinatedly alter both verses.
People have recognized that this verse gave Docetus a lot of ammunition.
Yeah, it's a problem, right? And so that is why I.
But that doesn't hurt your argument. It actually helps it.
That's
but I'm just saying that could explain it too.
Right. That's my point. Is that and the thing and this is just some of the stuff. These are the main things. There's other evidence that I present, but in the book. But the point is that these two items of fact give us a reason to downweight this evidence. Now, it doesn't downweight so far that it becomes evidence for mythicism or that it goes away as evidence altogether. It stays on the top margins of my error margins, evidence for historicity, but it's downweighted because it's weird. There's so many weird things about this, and there shouldn't be weird things. It should be straightforward. But the fact that there's so many weird things and it should be straightforward only downweights the evidence. It doesn't take the evidence away for historicity. I grant that it's actually evidence for historicity. It's just weaker than people think.
I can see where you're going with that. Me personally, I don't think it's that weird. Like I said, I'm not at the point where I can speak confidently about it yet. So yeah.
I'm not speaking confidently in the sense that I'm still counting as evidence.
I'll just leave that. I get what you're saying. I get what
I think so. So let's circle back all the way to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
This is a reasonable, excellent discussion. So this is how I want things to go. This is great.
Yeah, this is great.
It should be more like
I
this.
I had a feeling it would go this way.
But that still doesn't take away from the history of what happened. Litwa slandered me with false statements. I defended myself. And then you called me a liar and stuff like that. And rather than just examining whether what Litwa said was true or false. And so the takeaway I want is that I want people to use a more truth-oriented methodology. Is that when something like that happens, Litwa talks some shit about a scholar and that scholar defends themselves and therefore talks shit back at them. Rather than make it a dick measuring contest, go in and say, well, who's right? Fact check them, right? Figure it out. Did Litwa lie about me?
Now, let me ask you this. If you're wrong, if I'm wrong, and you never questioned his PhD or called him a liar, then ignored him about the same.
I did call him a liar. Yeah, that actually did happen.
Okay, but let's say we look into it. Maybe you forgot you said this. Maybe you were just the heat of the moment.
The idea
question his PhD, for example. Would you at least say, I apologize for that? I'm not saying you have to, but
yeah, like if it would depend on the exact wording. That's why I'm not clear. It's just a strange thing for me to say that like he shouldn't have his PhD. Like that's
sure.
Weird.
I get so that's fine. That's
yeah. Like
saying
if I said something that sounded like that,
sure.
Yeah. If I said something that sounded like that, that's not at all what I would have meant to have said, and I don't believe that at all. Which is an example of how that would work.
Yeah,
we could fact check it and just like solve it, like just go to like what is actually true and then resolve it that way rather than like piling on with more slander, right? That's I don't want that. And then the other thing is like that video was one of your worst videos as far as argumentation goes. Like it was all over the place. A lot of it didn't make sense.
A lot of good response from it.
The numbers
gained a lot of subscribers from it. Gained some Patreon members from it. People like it.
Oh man, I don't want that.
I can see why you like it.
I don't want that to encourage you because you can do better than that. I think you could do more coherent argumentation. And then like you said, there is a problem with you like questioning peer review.
I took that out.
Yeah, I mean I don't know. Like you said it in the Aaron.
Now, what can you clear that up, or do you want to go to super chats first? Maybe you don't.
All right, super chats. So let's do
super chats.
I'll say one thing and we'll go to super chats. All right. This is going longer than I wanted, but I'm having a good time. So,
if you want to grab another drink,
you and Aaron went rounds about the Jesus ben damnius thing. So the Jesus ben damnius argument has been peer reviewed 3 times. By the Journal of Early Christian Studies.
You talk about peer review. You talk about peer review. It's like a scientific breakthrough that everyone has to stop what they're doing and listen. you could
review
still
does
say
not-
something in peer review. It's
Yeah,
not.
there's tons of
convincing.
false stuff next to peer review.
Yeah.
I've said this myself many times. But what peer review does is it establishes that this is at least a respectable argument.
Sure.
That you should at least take it seriously. It means that this is not pseudo scholarship. That's what peer review means.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
so that's why peer review matters. And peer review, so like Sheffield Phoenix for my book. Now I got a bunch of peer reviews done myself through a variety of scholars. And I told that to Sheffield Phoenix. I do not know who they used, if they used their own people. I actually do know one of my peer reviewers. I think I sort of inferred this through like, because you're not told, right? You're not told who your peer reviewers are. But I think Paul Davies, Philip Davies. Fuck, which Davies?
I'm not sure.
The Davies who's recently deceased.
I think it's Philip, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who wrote an article about on biblical interpretation about how historicists need to take mythicists more seriously. But in that article, he said he leans
which I
to
agree with.
historicism.
Which I don't. I've always said that.
Right.
I've always said that. It's something that we should be on the table.
Right. And your video about me was not an example of taking it seriously or being respectful. But anyway,
I said it in the video too. I said mythicism is still
yeah, you did.
Plausible.
I'll grant you that. But then you went to exactly the opposite.
I gave my opinion. Gave my opinion.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, calling me a liar when really you're not saying anything that's relevant to my actual argument is a bit of a problem for me. But anyway,
saying I have.
So I think Philip Davies was one of my peer reviewers, and he was affiliated with Sheffield, so Sheffield University. That would make sense. I can't confirm that, but anyway, I don't know who they use, but they use 2 peer reviewers. Proving History, actually, by contract, I mandated that Prometheus books at the time that they get it peer reviewed by a professor of mathematics and a professor of biblical studies. And I know my peer reviewer on the biblical studies side was Hector Avalos. So that was, and I know the name of the mathematician, but I can't remember. But anyway, so that was peer reviewed as well. But that was because I wanted it peer reviewed, so I insisted, and it was in my contract that they had to do it. So Proving History is also peer reviewed. But the Ben Damney's argument appears in the Journal of was it Early Christian Studies?
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I got that. I actually read it after that video with Ehrman. I read the article and I think it was fine.
Yeah. I'm really proud of that article. It was, anyway, but also Lataster got it passed through peer review with Brill, which is one of the most prestigious academic publishers in the world. So that's actually survived peer review 3 times. My position on Philo that we were just talking about has survived peer review at least twice, in my case and in the other I mentioned in the video. I don't know why I got off on that, but I think that it got brought up. But anyway, so that was why I bring it up. But yes, absolutely. Let's clear that up. As a peer review does not guarantee something is true. Peer reviews do not have to agree with what they pass. That's actually fundamental, right? It's like you can disagree, but you have to agree that it's at least a respectable argument that should be taken seriously. That's kind of what peer review is about. They're just making sure this is not crank bullshit. They're making sure there's no obvious lies or wildly erroneous statements, things like that. And a lot of stuff slips through. And honestly, I do question how the Lazarus not running fast enough past peer review. That's a weird. And I don't know how Litwa's claim about me thinking Yahweh was a demon who attacked me as a child is past peer review. But
Gary Habermas got peer reviewed for the resurrection.
That's also true. That's true. Although it was that Zondervan, because then you do get into the question of like Zondervan's little. They don't send peer review stuff out to anybody but evangelists. But
wow, that's wrong.
Yeah. Well, let me take that back. I don't know that for a fact.
Okay.
I suspect that's the case. Let me be honest about that.
Okay.
So it's possible Zondervan occasionally uses secular peer review. So I take that back entirely because I can't say that.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's true based on the stuff that comes out from them. Although, to be clear, Zondervan comes out with some really useful and good stuff too. So I'm not saying that like they're just a propaganda mill. Not at all.
Sure.
But I do think there's favorable peer reviewers. But it turns out I had a favorable peer reviewer. So Philip Davies, I didn't know it at the time. Well, I did know it like shortly after. Well, after my book got published. He did confess to me in email privately that he doubted the historicity of Jesus, and apparently he had also done so to Raphael Lataster at the time, and I didn't know that. So when he died, both Lataster and I have come out about this. And so we do know that he actually thought mythicists had a case, and that there's probably at least 50-50. And that's kind of where Lataster comes down to, is 50-50 on this. But I had to triangulate to figure out that Philip Davies was one of my peer reviewers. But there would have been at least one others, because there's in a proper academic press, there's always at least two. And also to point out for people, when it comes up for other folks, a dissertation, like a PhD dissertation, it's at least 4.
Right. That's a bigger deal.
Right. So people forget that dissertations are the most peer-reviewed documents that you will find anywhere in academia.
Yeah.
So
now, if I'm not mistaken, isn't there another level above that where they do for like scientific studies? Like,
I don't know about that. I don't know if
okay.
I don't know if there's a level.
So
above,
dissertation is the highest.
There might be a lateral level. Well, PhD. So
yeah.
And anything that is a D, because there's a variety of Ds. So there's law degree. There's LD, I think. There's DD. You know, there's a lot of MD. Right. So doctors are the tops.
Right.
But they're all lateral things. So there's different ones. You're right. There's ones like different master's degrees that are. So like Master of Philosophy is higher than a Master of Arts, for example. And I had both because it was just part of the program I went through. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I did want to make clear to people that, and I do talk about this, about peer review there's an article. Well, you just look for Flaviana, search Flaviana in my blog, and then you'll find my article where I talk about peer review, including about my book, at least what I knew. And I don't talk about Philip Davies there, because that's an omission. I just realized that I could admit that now, and that's also an inference. So I'm not saying that I know this for a fact, but
sure,
I just suspect it's the case. But and then what was the other one? Oh, I lost track of what I was talking about.
Jesus Bandanius thing, maybe.
No, I think we're good. I just wanted to make the point about consensus. So arguments from consensus. I have an article on how to approach arguments from consensus logically. When should you follow it? When should you criticize it? And what do you need to go against a consensus, basically, or to doubt a consensus? And I go through the logic of that, and it's pretty. I think you'll get a different impression about my take on this than maybe you've gotten from the internet. Anyway, so those are 2 useful articles for the logic of how we approach peer-reviewed scholarship. Peer-reviewed scholarship is not guaranteed to be right. It's just guaranteed to be respectably good enough to take seriously. Is the point.
Yeah, that's a good point. And would you at least admit, or not admit, I'm sorry, agree that it's not a healthy thing for somebody, maybe a mythicist, or it doesn't matter what it is, whatever your belief is, to not just say, oh, well, I'm not an expert, so let me just refer to this one scholar who happens to have the arguments that I want to be correct, and then just hide behind. Don't you think people should get out and look at other opposing views more a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. If someone's doing that, if they're just name picking scholars who support them,
you see that a lot in the amateur world, you know.
Yeah, if that is the sum of your argument. Now, I would be careful, because I do suspect maybe you might be over interpreting people. So, like, in the case of John, for instance, when he mentions the Philo thing is one of the things that convinced him, that was literally one of the things. Like, he has a list of things. Right. So it's important to understand it's the stack, not the single thing. Sure. And so the same thing, like if someone says this scholar agrees with me, make sure you're checking if that's just part of a stack of arguments and not the argument, right? Because certainly if someone says, well, this scholar says this, then you should agree with them.
Because a Christian can just go behind Gary Habermas and say, look, Gary Habermas said it's all true.
Yeah, I make this argument all the time. In fact, I made this argument. Yeah, I agree with you. I made this argument with regard to Litwa. Is that you just can't just go around name dropping Norelli and say like, oh, well, Norelli says, therefore. And like, no, that's not how it works. Yeah, you should take Norelli seriously, but that doesn't mean that you can just say, well, the Norelli said something and I side with Norelli. You would have to give reasons, like, why do you side with Norelli? Like, what arguments did he have? So I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. You can't just name drop as an argument, but you should make sure that people, when you think they're name dropping, like, to make sure that they're not just name dropping, that they're also putting a stack of other arguments in there.
Yeah, I think that should be, standardized for people like myself who have channels and we're out here, giving our opinions and making content. And it's good to give all opposing viewpoints a shot, or give them a fair shake, even if you don't agree with it. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we you and I both agree that there are some people who deserve, like Habermas and William Lane Craig, who are just kind of snakes. But anyway,
I agree.
It's a separate matter. Let's get to super chats.
All right, let's get these in. Jacob B for the first super chat. Thank you for the super chat. To focus on the esoterica of Philo/Ascension of Isaiah is to divert from the reality of there being nil for Jesus, sans two forgeries of Josephus, plagiarized and mythologized Gospels and Revelations in Paul.
Plagiarized and mythologized. Well, let me say something on your side, Neil, on this. In chapter 8 of On the Historicity of Jesus, I cover the argument from external evidence, and I find that the argument is too weak to have any effect, basically, on mythicism, because it's too easy for Jesus to have been an insignificant figure and thus not show up in Josephus, for instance. And we discussed this earlier, you and I. So the argument from silence is weak for Jesus because it's too easy for him to have been a nobody that got blown up later in legend. If he was a nobody, he's not going to show up on anybody's radar except Christian hagiography. So that this argument from silence is weak, but it does mean, Habermas is wrong when he says we have more external evidence for Jesus than we have for Alexander the Great. So yes, I think, you can topple the triumphal Jesus this way too. The Jesus that Gospels claim was famous not only in Judea but across all Syria, as Matthew says. That's bullshit, right? So the Gospels are definitely blowing up, totally making up his fame. So you do have to accept that. And there are some historians who try to make claims about Jesus that entail he would have been more on people's radar than the evidence suggests. So one can test different theories of historicity by how much they predict Jesus should have been noticed by other authors and stuff. So it is important to keep track of the argument from silence. It matters. It will differentiate between plausible and implausible historicist theses. But there are too many plausible historicist theses that can survive this argument. And so that doesn't really work as an argument. I know there's other points that Jacob is putting in here, but similar arguments can be made about them all. And I think I agree in the end, the Revelations and Paul bit is totally where the debate should be. Right. And you are absolutely right. Like the passages you mentioned are the ones in contention. They should weigh, if we're going to be as far against our thesis as we can reasonably be possible, we should give them some weight for historicity. And it's just a debate about how much to weight them really as evidence.
Sure.
So I think we should be talking about Paul, but that doesn't, when I say that, I don't mean we shouldn't be talking about Philo and the Ascension of Isaiah and stuff. We should be talking about all this stuff. But if you're going to make it about mythicism, really, it does come down to the Pauline argument. But I think one thing I think that you came to a revelation to in a different sense in this talk is that the Philo stuff doesn't really help mythicists other than taking away an argument against it. It creates a plausibility, but it's just as compatible with historicity. And in fact, you can come up with a completely plausible theory of historicity of Jesus that is entirely even motivated by this discovery in Philo.
So some good points there. Thank you for that super chat, Jacob B. And Godless Engineer is kind of, doing his rants in my
this is a fair question. Like you're behaving differently. You're behaving much more.
What do you want me to do? Do you want me to sit here and say that you don't care about truth? Or okay, why don't I ask you this then? Do you think having a book out, being the mythicist guy, weighs in on your ability to sort of look at this thing from another angle at some point? Do you think that sometimes you sort of are arguing because you're just the default guy of mythicism? Does that happen? Which I understand, by the way.
Well,
that's true
to an extent, but actually, I am for even longer than I've been. I was a hardcore historicist, once upon a time. For even longer than that, I've actually been a hardcore philosopher. Sure. I've published in philosophy before history, even in book form, and I've always been a very strong proponent of figuring out how do we burn test our beliefs and therefore do our damnedest to disprove our own beliefs or our own hypotheses. And
I think it's a very healthy practice to try to do that.
Not only is it healthy, it's literally the only logically possible way to know you're right about anything. Is you have to, you have to try, like sincerely try, not fake try, not like rigged try, but sincerely try to refute your own hypothesis, because it's when you do that and fail that you know your belief is probable. And in fact, you can actually show mathematically that this is the case. This is a probability Bayesian theory point. And I do this. There's advice on probabilistic reasoning. Advice on probabilistic reasoning. And on my blog, it makes this point and shows the math, why this is literally necessarily the case. It's not just advice. And because I've not always been a Bayesian. The Bayesianism really opened my eyes on how to do this. But even before that, I was very big on this exact idea. So at the same time, when not only can I speak authoritatively pro-mythicism, I know all the freaking arguments and evidence and everything that people have tried to pull, at least academics, on against mythicism and pro-historicity. Like, I thoroughly studied this. I can, like, right now I'm the best proponent for historicity that I know. And I only say that because I'm disappointed that no one has come out with a peer-reviewed book specifically defending historicity. I'm still waiting for that. I have some scholars that I dream would do it. I've asked them, and they all say they want to do other things instead. So that's not going to happen. But I do hope that that's the case. But until that happens, like, I'm the one who's reviewed all the arguments, so I actually could play devil's advocate on everything pretty well.
I'm interested to see how you come up with the historical Jesus from your point of view, because
yeah, I mean, you can watch.
I think that'll help. I think that'll help people see that you're not just the mythicist guy.
But this isn't new. Like, I've been doing this. Like, if people who pay attention know, I've argued plausible historical.
I've heard you do it before.
But to get back to Godless Engineer's question, is he's right? Like, there's a lot of slander in your video. There's a lot of Richard Carrier's a liar, etc. And the evidence for me being a liar isn't there, right? Like the points you make don't establish that I'm a liar at all. So that's, I think, Godless Engineer's point, is that you're like being nice here, but you were slandery there. And so the question is like, are you going to fix that in any way, I guess?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's how I felt at the time, just like how you thought it was right to,
that would be a thing.
Say
right?
that
like,
I'm having a mental breakdown, which you've done to other people. So let's not even.
Yeah, but I had reason for that. Like the original video was, let's just say, not what you would expect from someone who's being reasonable.
Well, I've only got that response.
It was also highly different from your.
I've only got that response from a handful of people. You and John, a couple others, but I've got some good responses from it. So I'm just saying that I admitted that last part.
Don't use that to encourage you to continue the bad methodology. The methodology of calling someone a liar on weak evidence. Call someone a liar on good evidence. Totally. Like, if you've got them, do it. But don't jump immediately to, because I don't get their argument.
Well, then
they're a liar.
Don't you think calling Litwa a liar would be maybe, even
if
I was wrong about something?
I have really good evidence.
Well,
and that's why I asked you in the beginning that you should check into.
I think the jury's still out on that, whether he lied or got something wrong. There's a big difference there.
Well, that's the thing, is like, how could he get it wrong? There's no other explanation other than he didn't do the research. And so by representing himself as someone who had done, that is false light deception. That is a form of lying. And I agree that I think people find that kind of lying easier to do because they don't feel like it's lying. Like, he's not, he said, well, I didn't check, so I don't know what I'm saying is false. But he still didn't check. And so he does know that he doesn't know that what he's saying is true. And he's not admitting that, right? He's pushing the idea that I've got a PhD. I know what I'm talking about. You should understand me to have done the research. And I'm going to declare that Richard is spreading disinformation, even though there's no disinformation in my book on this. That is deceptive. That is actually immoral. And I am going to call people out for that if they're going to act that way. And I have, like I said, I have good evidence for that, not weak evidence. So there's a difference between calling someone a liar on good evidence and calling someone a liar on no decent evidence that they're lying about anything.
All right. Well, let's agree to both stop calling each other liars on things that, maybe
unless I catch you lying.
Yeah. Or that.
It's all about the truth. It's all about evidence.
Sometimes you think someone might be lying and they just get something wrong, though. You know,
It's
that's
all
always,
about evidence. Yeah, I've caught people being wrong about things, and I can't ascertain that they're lying about it. And that's what I would say. Like, I think they got this wrong. I don't know what they did. I don't know how they got it wrong. But there are occasions where it's impossible to have got something wrong, where there's no possible thing that could be happening other than they're lying about something. And if you read my article about Litwa, you'll understand what I mean by that.
Sure. Well, yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, well, we'll get to the bottom of everything. There's still want to talk to Litwa about some things, but we'll get to it, and I'll be more than willing to get to where the truth is. So you got my word on that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's what I want. That's what I would like the community to do.
Exactly. Cade Welly has a quick question about Litwa. Actually, quick question: was it Litwa that said you are possessed by a demon? Sorry if this has already been asked. I got the stream late.
Well, possessed might be too hard a word. I'd have to bring it up. Can you? So I'll tell you. Can you bring up things?
Yeah. What do you need?
Let me find it first. So first of all, let me get my website up, and then I'll get you the URL. Can I throw things in comments? I have a comment.
Yeah,
box.
throw it. Yeah,
totally.
Are you putting it in the comments of the YouTube or on the private chat? What do you? I mean, so
not the private. I'll put it in the public, so everybody will have it.
So they can go it too. Okay, I see what you're saying.
All right. Let's see. Litwa. That should just do it. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to drop that in. This should go.
Yeah, this came out as mine for some reason.
Weird.
Yeah,
that's probably because I'm in your. I
can't copy that and paste it.
It doesn't matter.
In the private chat too. Just put it in the private chat too. Now we both have it.
Okay.
That way, private chat you can actually copy and paste stuff.
I have you behind my camera, so.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. What am I looking for here? Private chat.
It's right. It's like 3 down from the comments. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So you want me to share this?
Oh yeah, totally. It's already in the public comments under your.
All right, perfect. I'm going to share this right now. Let's see. Window. There we go. Okay.
So he spent several pages on it too. So that was really weird.
Yeah. Any particular spot you want me to go to?
Okay. Here's my description of it. And you can here we go. This is a quote. Oh no, that's not a quote. Never mind. So here's a description. You can go to his book. You can probably get it through Amazon Look Inside, maybe do Carrier and check. It depends on which pages they've released for that. That doesn't always come out. But
yeah,
if you look in Worse End, I go on the 10 pages devoted to me. Litwa literally burns the first 2, a fifth of his critique, to developing this bizarre thesis.
Oh, here it is right here. Okay.
Yeah, that I experienced a literal demonic attack by Yahweh, and this has driven me on a crusade to destroy the historicity of Jesus. So not that he doesn't say that I'm possessed by a demon, but that
is there anywhere that he got this from? Is there anything? Is this completely made up?
I go on here and explain
okay
my theory as to how he.
I remember reading this before, but I just forgot. I read this article before.
I don't know how he came to this belief, but he cites certain things, and I come to sort of put it together, like inferred, like I did with Philo, what he was thinking. No, so what is true, I can say, is that I have written in some of my literature, I think it's in Senseless Goodness Without God, about how I did have a hypnopompic hallucination, which is very common. When people, and they often involve attacks by creatures, usually aliens these days, and they often involve feelings of paralysis and pressures on the chest, right? So my was a classic one, but I was young. I was junior high, I think. And I thought that there was this, I saw this demon in the dark. It was attacking me and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed and I was trying to punch it. And then when I finally broke free of its power or whatever, and then punched it, I woke up and my fist was flying through the air, right? As I was laying on the ground or laying in my bed. Yeah, that's all I said. I didn't mention anything about it being Yahweh or my thinking it was Yahweh or this having anything to do with Christianity. And those are the weird things. I don't understand where Litwa is getting any of that, much less how he's connecting that to driving me on a crusade to destroy the historicity of Jesus. When in fact, I was on a crusade to when I was the feedback editor of the Secular Web, which was, what was that? 95 to 2000-ish, somewhere around there.
And it's going back.
Yeah, I was very snarky against mythicists, but that was because all the mythicists coming in the comments on the feedback.
Do you have those saved at all anywhere or no?
I don't know if they might exist still in the feedback records, the archives, etc.
That would be interesting to see.
I
that
don't know, and it would be really a mighty feat to find all of my comments in there.
Yeah.
If they even are all there still. But yeah, well, and I wrote an article for Secular Web on this, so against Kersey Graves, because back then that was the hot thing. Everybody goes, Kersey Graves, 16 crucified saviors, proves mythicism. And I totally fucking destroyed that.
I'm sure DM Murdoch was big back then too.
No, she was the number one. Yeah, it was her cult people that emailed me angry things all the time. So anyway,
she wasn't that bad though. I think she was interesting. She was an interesting scholar.
Yeah. Anyway, we can take the website stuff off.
Okay, all right,
and go back. But yes, the answer to the person's question for this super chat is Litwa said this, not possessed. He didn't say I was possessed by a demon. Let's be accurate, but he did say what I pointed out just now. And it is really weird. I don't say that anywhere. There's no reason to infer that from anything I've written. And I've actually kind of written opposite things, like even in my book, which he claims to have written, but claims to have read, but didn't. I actually point out in the beginning how I have no actual beef with the historical Jesus. Like I totally happy to have published a pro-historicity book if that's where the evidence went.
Okay. That's interesting. Rex Profanus, thank you for the super chat. Did we figure out if Jesus is real yet?
No, obviously not. Not between us, no. Even I don't know the answer to that question.
No.
I say 1 in 3, right? So that's still...
I talk about this on my channel all the time. The evidence is not good. So we're just left with the little bit we have and what's the most likely scenario. And some people think it's likely they didn't exist. Some people think it's likely he did. So
yeah, and that reminds me of another point that I think
you know what? Before you even say that real quick, I'm going to say this right now. I just remember I wanted to bring this up in the video. I forgot because you do mention, and towards the end of your book, you said I think you said 3 outcomes. One, that we can prove historicity. Another, that we can prove mythicism. And then the third one was, we can't really prove either way. We should just disagree. And I like that you put that in there. That was my favorite part of your book.
It's totally true. And that's where Lataster comes down, right? Is he's 50-50. Yeah. And that's his 50-50 result past peer review with Brill, right? So it's definitely like it is a respectable argument. It needs to be taken more seriously. I was going to say something else, but I forget what it was. So.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
It'll come up. But thank you for that super chat. Dion Yasion, thank you for that $5 super chat. I really appreciate that. Doctor, what books were used by ancient writers to teach how to write myths and subsequently the Gospels?
This is a reference to education theory. So actually one of my professors that I worked with at Columbia University was Raffaella Cribiori, who's like one of the leading scholars on ancient education, and William Harris, who's the world's leading scholar on ancient literacy. So I definitely had a lot of reading and experience with this subject. So it varies, but the primary textbook is Homer, and it depends on at what level you went. So like as you started with Homer at age 7, or usually or when you're a kid, Homer was your primary vehicle, but there were other, like some of the tragedians, Euripides is common also for playwrights and so on. And then Isocrates was another one, was very popular. And as you got at higher levels, more books would be drawn in. So at the highest level, which was the level when you'd be taught composition, which would be the most important part of this question, Herodotus would be a major reading. And so everyone who was educated enough in Greek to compose literature, so like the Gospels are literature, would have read Herodotus. It would have been part of their school exercises. And other authors. Isocrates, Herodotus, and Homer would be the top. Homer would be the top 3, right? So did I not say Homer before? Was I saying something else?
I think you might have, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Then I take that back. It was Homer is the primary school text.
Yeah.
Homer's
got that what do you call it? Dictalic prose, where it's like a certain 8, and then another.
It's a repetitive rhythmic because it's meant to be sung. It's meant to be sung.
Exactly. So the bard would sing it. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a song. And that's why lyrical poetry is called that, because it's lyrics to a lyre, playing a lyre. So lyrical poetry is just song lyrics, basically.
Sure.
So modern rock and roll is the new lyric poetry, really.
Yeah, it would be like it'd be like a musician learning how to compose a song using other material.
Yes, absolutely. And also, like,
and by the way, that tells you something, because when you are inspired by certain music, it doesn't mean you're copying, but you're gonna it's going to end up in the text in some sort of way.
Yeah,
and that's how you see these similarities.
Right. We have treatises about this. Seneca writes to his friend Lucilius. Is it Lucilius? I might have the name wrong. It's the person we think maybe wrote the Etna, but we're not sure. But anyway, Seneca wrote a letter about writing a poem about Etna. And in that he talks about the value and function of literary mimesis, basically. Mimesis or mimesis are both correct ways to pronounce that if people are interested. Depends on whether you're following the ancient Greek or the modern English. But anyway, so he writes this letter and talking about like it is a form of appreciation and honor to emulate other authors. Like you're basically honoring the author that you're emulating. They didn't think of it as plagiarism.
Right.
They thought of it as
preserving.
Not preserving, but riffing. It's more like riffing, right?
Exactly.
So is the way to do it. Like they totally saw it that way.
Yeah, and that's how you end up with text that Jesus is getting his feet rubbed by a woman. Odysseus getting his feet rubbed by, like you see these commonalities popping up throughout the text because it's mimesis.
Yeah, and when you do that, you'll often take elements from multiple sources and you're merging them, and then of course you have your own purpose, whatever that is, and so you're going to change things up. But there's an article I cite, I think in OHJ, I'm not sure, on the Crei. Let's see, I'm going to put it in the public comments. The Greek word.
Sure.
Spell that right? Yeah. I think it'll come out under your name, but that's the Greek word. Crei were these little vignettes that you would write. So you'd say, you want to teach a lesson involving this character, like Hercules, and he's has to like go rescue a bird or something. Like these are the assignments that you get in school, and then you would write this little vignette about that. And you have to do original composition. You would be expected to emulate some things, like have some allusions and references and so on. So you were taught to riff. And we actually have examples of these, the Crei. We have some school exercises and stuff at different levels. Most of it comes from Egypt, the sands of Egypt. But you also have textbooks. We actually have authors like, I can't remember right off the top of my head, but we actually have some actual textbook authors who write about how do you teach, right? And so we have a lot of that. Anyway, Raffaella Cribiori's book on ancient education, I think it's Greek education in the papyri or something. I might have the title wrong, but she's the leading expert, and she is the one that will give you all the basics on this. But I also recommend Thomas Brody's book, Birthing the New Testament. The reason I mention this is because he has a huge introductory section that is a massive survey of scholarship on mimesis in ancient education. And
this is crazy.
Yeah, it's the best treatment, and it's where MacDonald got it, right? Like MacDonald, I think, like either studied under or with Brody. But anyway,
sure.
But anyway, so Brody has a really excellent. And if you want a shorter version and you want to double it up with some other interesting reading, the Homeric Gospels, or Homer and the Gospel of Mark, it's the Gospel of Mark and the Homeric Epics. I can't remember the title, but the original,
by Dennis
Dennis MacDonald book. It's really thin. It's a quick and easy read. It's fascinating. But that also has a really short version of summarizing the educational scholarship on mimesis. So that would answer the question that Dion has asked.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good point. Godless engineer, still doing his thing over there, having a heart attack. Weird that you say other viewpoints should be given a chance when you call mythicism a church, Carrier the Pope, and me a pastor. Care to retract? No, I don't retract, because I think sometimes, not you, but I think a lot of your followers can really go out there and they look very dogmatic, and they can get real, intense with this stuff, where it looks like the polar opposites happening with apologetics. Sometimes they have an answer for everything. Sometimes you can't just have a regular discussion about these things without saying, no, you're wrong. You didn't read the scholarship. You're misrepresenting everything. Blah, 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 blah.
Unless you actually argue.
Calm down.
That's the thing. So,
yeah, just calm down a little bit. That's all.
I mean,
and then I'll retract it.
I mean, what I think happens is that you do something like the video you did, where you definitely don't present any evidence that I was a liar, but call me a liar. You get my argument completely wrong and don't actually respond to it. And then they say, hey, what the fuck? And then you react, in an equally vociferous way. And then it escalates from there, right? And so, but the escalation started when you got something wrong. And I think you might, and if you want to de-escalate things, you got to start that, right? You got to say, like, okay, yeah, I shouldn't have called Richard a liar. Did I actually call you
a liar?
I have the auto-generated transcript. It's in there a lot, but anyway,
I actually called you a liar.
Yeah,
I don't remember doing
or lying. The words lying or liar were in there.
I think I said you were sneaky on some things.
You did say that also, but yeah, no, there's
like I still stand by the fact the Philo Angel thing can be a little sneaky at times. I'm just saying.
I mean,
it comes off that way.
So here's a good.
I'm not trying to start a fight with you right now.
Yeah, but no, this is a good point. Is that I'm not sneaky about it. I mean, there might be people that you think are sneaky about it in the way they write about it or talk about it. Like maybe they're much looser than I am. I'm very careful in choosing my words. Even in that one video, like I'm very brief, and then the slide kind of is more accurate. But even then, like you have a source text to go to check what I mean. Like you say, what does he mean?
Yeah, but the people in the crowd don't have this book.
Yeah, but I say, but you do. That's what
sure.
I'm saying. So like before you do a video, you could go and say, maybe I should go look at Richard's argument if I'm going to respond to it. And represent it accurately, and represent arguments that actually no, you didn't actually. You don't really deal with my argument, and you put in a lot of other weird arguments that don't really have anything to do with my argument, like the numbers thing that I still don't understand. But
it was like a split second, for a quick little second.
Okay, but anyway, so that's what they're reacting to, right? So the escalation starts when you're slandering a scholar, and you're not really fairly treating their argument. And also like when it ties into the whole like, well, this should never have passed peer review, and that kind of thing. When it's passed peer review multiple times and multiple authors, it's not just me. That looks like you're just doing a dick measuring contest, and you're not. So you're basically causing the escalation when you do that, rather than like, here's the evidence why I think someone is lying, and it's actually you've taken seriously and looked very closely what they said. And confirmed that that's actually the case, right? So, like, be more careful, I guess, in the way that if you look at my Litwa piece, you can see an example of what I'm doing and how it's possible to verify these things. That's the kind of thing I want more of. I want like more attention to what is true, rather than let's just attack people we don't like because they attacked someone we like.
Well, that's what I would like to see with mythicists too. Is taking.
Well, I think if you de-escalate, they'll de-escalate. Is the thing, right?
All right, we'll see about that, because you get some pretty dogmatic people who this thing is just, it's a big conspiracy against mythicists. Academia is corrupt. I'm not just saying this like,
yeah, but I mean,
I'm actually quoting mythicists right now.
Who cares? I don't understand why that has
that matters though. That matters when we're having these discussions.
But
if I'm talking to somebody who thinks,
all you have to say is I don't think that's true, or here's why I don't think that's true.
I do say that.
Well, I'm going to say I've seen some of your DMs. Like you're not a calm arguer like I am. So
that's how
I think you escalate things.
Yeah, but when if you're referring to somebody in particular who I've not calmed towards, that's because this is the person who jumps in my chats, says, I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm a liar, and constantly throws out 1,000 comments at me. Now you're going to get it right back at you. I'm not going to let you say that shit to me. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell John Gleason, because John Gleason doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
I'm pretty sure all of this
dude doesn't know you doing the same thing. He admitted to me he doesn't even know the Greek alphabet. So why would you have a strong opinion on the word ganaho, or how a sentence structure in Greek is, if you don't even know the fucking Greek alphabet? Shut the fuck up. Let the fucking experts talk.
He's actually using experts. He's actually
using one expert who he just sees has the same argument as him. That's not how you do things.
So, but
that's how you be dogmatic.
There's a difference between like saying, well, actually, like here's what I was told about the grammar argument. Here, let me show you the argument, and then you have an actual discussion about the argument.
He was telling Stephen,
throwing childish remarks at people is the issue. Like being childish is not a good way to actually create good sound engagement. And I think there are a lot of instances where I've seen your behavior look a little childish when it comes to this. I think you don't like being criticized, and it becomes a problem for you, and you readily escalate these things. And I think you could readily de-escalate them if you just like stick to just the facts, right? Like don't go to like insults, or don't just like respond to someone by saying their video is bullshit. Like give say like I disagree. I think you fail to get my argument.
You have someone like John who doesn't know what they're talking about, who only uses one person.
I don't know. I don't think that's true.
Last night on a thread, somebody, my friend Steven, Steven, he speaks fluent Greek. He also reads classical Greek. He's better than Greek than most people we know. Trying to explain to John some of this stuff, and John's telling him that he doesn't know what he's talking about, and like talking down to him.
I haven't seen this.
He looks so cringe when he does that. That's all I'm saying.
I can't evaluate something I haven't seen. I can only talk about the things I've seen. And you do this too, and you contribute to it, and that's a problem. And if you notice, like the way you've been in this video is great. Keep doing that, right?
I will.
Don't do that in DMs and stuff. Like, don't shit talk people and things like that.
Well, if they don't jump in my chat just telling me I'm a liar and stupid, they won't get the same response back. This is someone who's tagging me on Facebook in the middle of the day when I'm not even talking.
What I'm telling you is that is
to talk shit.
That is the long
something I've never done to him ever.
This is the long chain of the end result of escalating behavior. This isn't like he just came out of the blue and did this. This is he did one thing, you did another. He escalated, you escalated. He escalated, you escalated. Yeah, he escalated, you escalated. That's what's fucking happened. And if you want to stop that, you've got to stop it. You've got to start de-escalating. If you're okay, fuck. This is
that's why I just ended up muting his notifications.
I mean, that's fine. Like, yeah, that's the best way to do it. If you don't want to engage with him, that's totally fine. I have no problem with that. But just do be.
And I offered to debate him too, and he said no. So it's like, if you don't want to debate me, then seriously, what the fuck? Why do you think such a big deal out of it?
The 3-hour debate between you and Aaron Adair does not encourage people to want to debate you because it's frustrating as fuck. I would be aware of that.
I think it's frustrating. I think Aaron was frustrating.
Yeah,
that's how I see it. So,
Aaron was right.
And I had no. Well, that's not true though. I have a lot of people who called me after my discussion with Aaron Adair.
Yeah, this is bad.
Good job on holding your ground. Because that shit is fucking cringe.
This is bad. You're allowing your own cult of personality folks to encourage you to continue following the bad methodology that you're engaging in.
But don't you think it's interesting how
discourage you from doing that?
It's interesting how
don't take that as encouragement to keep doing that.
I get what you're saying, but don't you think it's interesting how certain people see it that I'm right, some people see that you're right?
This just confirms the cult of personality bullshit that I've been talking about. I don't advocate.
And Aaron and I, if people's opinion on Aaron and I's discussion is meaningless, if you ask Aaron and I how our discussion was, we both think it was fine. I'm doing it right now. I get like this. I was at the Bills game the other day.
Yeah, no, there was
at the Bills game the other day, talking to people at the Bills game, talking loud. I get like this. This is my personality.
Yeah,
this is why I'm not boring.
I'm not just talking about talking loud. That's not really the issue.
That's what I was doing. I never once criticized.
That contributes.
Never once said anything to Aaron Adair that was emotional. Never criticized him as a human. Never didn't say anything.
No, that's actually true. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I think it was a good discussion.
Why couldn't you treat me that way?
I think I am treating you that way.
You are now, but you didn't before. That's the thing.
Okay. All right. And I said that, and I acknowledge that. It could have went differently.
Yeah. So. Okay. That's the goal. I want to push in that direction. Like, let's learn that lesson. But yeah, you yourself can take steps to de-escalate things and rebuild relationships. If you want to, you don't have to. It can be productive to do that, but that's up to you.
Yeah. Aaron Adair, speaking to the devil. Thank you for the super chat. Glad for the conversation, but back to angry arguments. Which is the best Star Wars film? I think it's The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you. Damn it!
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, we agree on something. There we go.
No, we actually agree on a lot of things. You know that, but yeah. It's true.
That's where the most crazy shit happens.
And if someone were to say new Star Wars films, then I would say Rogue One. But
yeah, the new ones are pretty good. I will admit that. Some people hate on the new ones. I think they're pretty good.
I hate almost all the new ones, but Rogue One was like, that was a cut above, I thought.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the latest ones though. I can't. Which one?
The old ones are the best, I think.
Oh yeah.
The original three.
Empire, I think, is a masterpiece of filming. Like,
it really is.
It's a cinematic classic, and so there's reasons why I think that, yada yada. But that would be a whole other show.
yeah. That's interesting too, because that's like the myth making thing, you know?
Well, I do philosophy of aesthetics a lot, actually. So, and also aesthetics of film is a thing I've written on. So I definitely love talking about that. And also like how film, also novels, but, and graphic novels and everything, but, how film has, and even some aspects of TV shows, but have replaced mythology in our discourse. So when we want to give an analogy, a moral lesson or whatever, we'll talk about a particular episode of Star Trek or something. And that's how like Homer or the Gospels or stuff like that used to be used. Like they would use myths to teach lessons about, oh, when so-and-so did such and such, you remember the lesson we learned from that. And so now we know and admit that it's all fiction. Like no one thinks, Captain Picard really lives or whatever. But we still think that we can get truths out of fiction because fiction can deploy and can display like, ideas and models for society and human emotion and human relations and yada, yada. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot I could do on that. I'll do a whole show on the
It would be interesting. Yeah. One of your books I really love is the history of the science in the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I mean that's basically from my dissertation. So
you show in that piece. If there's any historicists out there that can't stand Carrier, if you want to check that book out and you'll change your mind.
Okay,
you are a real historian.
Half the historicists being like fanatical Christians. I'm joking. I'm exaggerating. I'm being hyperbolic. Yeah. But being that a lot of historians or historicists are Christian, they won't like a lot of that book. But because it is written in destruction of a particular Christian apologetic. Yeah. That actually inspired the whole dissertation. And it was funny because when I wrote the prospectus for the dissertation, and I went to, and it was the original dissertation topic was going to be why the scientific revolution didn't happen in the ancient world.
Yeah.
And there's a particular reason why I wanted to do that. And it had to do with Christian arguments and stuff. And I had like a whole 10 arguments that it was the thing. And I go to my advisor, William Harris at the time. And then I said, so here's my prospectus. He looks at it. He goes, okay, that's 10 dissertations. Pick one. And so I ended up on attitudes towards the scientist. And that did let me get into a lot of other aspects of it, like scientific progress in the ancient world, attitudes towards scientific progress, the role of, so the idea of head-hand divide, the idea that, aristocratic thinkers couldn't get their hands dirty and that this prevented scientific progress. And this is not true, although it was more true later, actually, under Christian tenure than it was under the pagan tenure. But so things like that, I get into a lot of, almost all 10 of the arguments I got into in the book anyway, in my dissertation. But nonetheless, that's how it started. And the core of it is, what was the social perspective on scientists? What did people think about them? And so that has, I feel like what even was a scientist? Like, what was the word and what did people think they did? And then, literary discussions of them, and then a chapter on scientific progress, like what did they actually do? Who were these people? Where did they come from? What class of society, etc. So people are interested in that kind of stuff. And then I have a whole section on, because I really hate the argument that the Greeks only invented 13 things, which is, that comes from classics, by the way. It's not a Christian thing, but there was a historian, it was Peter Green, who claimed that the Greeks only invented 13 things. I'm like, no. So anyway, I have a massive refutation of that, which is just a list of like 200.
Peter Green, man. Peter Green's great.
Yeah. That's a good book, by the way, generally.
This is amazing. This is one of the best books I've ever read.
The one bit that he has in there about ancient science is completely wrong. But
I got to check it out now. Now that you mention it, after this is over, send me which page. I want to check it out.
Oh,
because I love your perspective in that book about the ancient science.
You mean the pages in green on? I think I cite them in
this very book right here. Yeah, this is
in my book. I cite the pages in that book.
Okay, I'll check it out.
But I'll make sure I find out for you.
Yeah. I actually really like where he goes in here about the Serapis movement and how he lays out how the Serapis movement, the synchronistic movement that happens in the Ptolemaic time, really shows you how religion is like an evolution in itself. These ideas, how they morph into each other. So there's a lot of stuff in here. He talks about the beef between what's his name of Rhodes and Callimachus. You know what I'm talking about? He talks about those two guys that are having to completely hate each other, and they're just talking.
No, there's a lot of good stuff in there. I would recommend it to people who want to study Christian origins, because that book sets up the stage for Christianity, right? So he's not really right. That's not the point that Peter Green is doing, but he's writing about how things got to the place they are. You really can't understand the origins of Christianity without Peter Green's background.
Yeah, you have to get this. This gives you all the lays down everything that happened for the 300 years before Christianity.
And you'll find a lot of Christian apologists try to deny this. Like I said, the Jews were so hostile to influence they would never adopt anything from Greece. And it's like, that's so false. It's like so false. And I'm glad to see a lot of like top scholars today, like Robin Walsh and so on, don't buy that argument anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of been dissolved.
I think that's going to become the consensus.
I mean, Litwa himself, Jesus Deus is a classic example.
He knows that
completely destroying this hypothesis. That anyway. So that's anyway. Alexander Actium is a good, and it really does fill you in on Alexander Actium, right?
It's exactly what it says it is. It tells you what
330 to 31 AD or BC,
exactly.
Basically. Yep. It's just what happened, and it's mostly the East. So it doesn't cover Rome so much. If you want Roman history, like what was happening in Rome during all that time, there are other books for that. But Mary Beard's book, her textbook on ancient Rome,
it's a lot about Pergamum, Egypt, Syria, shit like that.
Right, exactly. It's mostly about the Middle East. But people who want the Roman side of it, because they merge, right? I mean, the Battle of Actium is when things really come together.
The Roman side of it. Mary Beard, baby.
Yeah, Mary Beard. Yes.
This is another one. It's a must-have.
Right.
If you're into these topics, you got to have this.
But to note, Mary Beard is an excellent scholar, one of the top Roman scholars there are. But she did a textbook, like a standard textbook for Roman history, and that is now the best textbook for Roman history.
It's not 12 Caesars, is it?
No. I can't remember what it's called. No,
you're talking about something different. I don't have that one.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's a college textbook.
Her 12 Caesars, though, she lays out the time period from Julius Caesar all the way to Domitian.
Yeah.
She goes in. That's another good one.
But for people who noted, you just showed the 2-volume set on ancient religion.
Religions of Rome. This is a must-have. If you're into religions, this is a must-have. You can't say you're into religions without having this. That
was a course text I had in one of the studies. So I studied under Reeves. So Reeves also wrote a book on ancient religion, and so he introduced me to a lot of that stuff, including those books. That 2-volume set's great. So anyway, this takes me back, man. That was a long time ago. But anyway,
There's 2 more supers. One's from Myth Vision. He says, "I like turtles."
Okay. Very good. I hate turtles. No, I'm fine with turtles.
Thank you for that, Derek. I appreciate that. Derek, this was Derek's idea to do this, but I think it was a great idea. I think we squashed everything and we learned. I learned, to behave differently towards you, and so hopefully something different. Something good comes out of this. But thank you for that, Derek. And the last one is from Dion Yasion. Myth Vision is better. Derek doesn't say I'm in a church and isn't insulting for no reason. All right, point taken. All right, that's the last one.
All right, sweet.
Any last thoughts?
We almost went 3 hours. Damn.
Yeah,
I was hoping it wouldn't be this long, but anyway, I had a good time. So
I'm sure you want to get back to relaxing now because you probably were working all day. So
not all day, all week. We've been grinding it. So I definitely have to bail.
All right, and you have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over you.